The grinding sound of metal against metal echoed through the workshop as 14-year-old Jack Harrington carefully guided the lathe. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the autumn chill that seeped through the walls of the family machine shop. Pennsylvania winters showed no mercy to the working class of Steelton. The year was 1934, and the Great Depression had its fingers wrapped tightly around the nation's throat. The familiar smell of machine oil and hot metal filled Jack's nostrils. It was the scent of his childhood. While other boys his age played baseball in vacant lots or traded comic books, Jack had grown up learning the secrets of steel and iron from his father. Thomas Harrington cast a long shadow both literally and figuratively. 6'3", with shoulders like an ox and hands that could bend metal, the elder Harrington was a legend in Steelton. Not just for his mechanical genius, but for what he'd done in the Great War. The Congressional Medal of Honor that hung in their modest living room told only part of the story. "Tighten that bolt one more turn, Jack, but not too much. Let the metal breathe," Thomas said, his deep voice carrying over the machine noise. Jack looked up to see his father watching from the doorway, leaning slightly on his hickory cane. The war had left its mark on Thomas in more ways than one. A German shell had shattered his left leg, and even after 16 years, there were days when walking was a victory in itself. "Yes, sir." Jack made the adjustment with precision. At 14, he already had the hands of a master machinist. The town's steel mill had started bringing their difficult repair jobs to the Harrington shop rather than shipping them to Philadelphia. "That's a fine piece of work." Thomas limped over to inspect the repaired motor shaft, his practiced eye catching details others would miss. "The mill needs this by morning. It'll keep 20 men working tomorrow." Jack nodded seriously, understanding the weight of his work. In these times, keeping men employed was sacred duty. He wiped his hands on a rag that had long ago turned from white to a permanent mechanical gray. Thomas reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn pocket watch. The gold plating had worn off in places, revealing the brass beneath. He flipped it open, checking the time with a practiced movement that Jack had seen thousands of times before. "Your mother will have supper ready soon. Better wash up." Jack knew the watch's history. It had been in his father's tank when the shell hit, somehow surviving the inferno that had nearly claimed his father. The crystal was cracked, and the minute hand slightly bent. Thomas had refused to have it repaired, saying it told better time this way. True time, the kind where seconds matter. The Harrington home sat 3 blocks from the shop, a modest 2-story wooden structure that Thomas had built himself after returning from France. The smell of pot roast wafted from the kitchen where Anna Harrington was orchestrating the daily miracle of feeding a family of 6 on what little they had. Anna had once been the belle of Steelton, her golden hair and bright smile catching every young man's eye. Now at 40, with 4 children and years of hardship, silver streaked her hair, and worry lines etched her once smooth face. But when she smiled, rarely these days, Jack could still see the beauty that had captured his father's heart. Jack's siblings were already seated at the table. Emma, 12, helped her mother by setting plates while twins Michael and Matthew, only 7, fought over who would get the larger portion tonight. Though hunger was their constant companion, the Harringtons were better off than many. The shop provided steady, if modest, income when others had nothing. "Jack, wash those hands properly. I won't have machine oil at my dinner table." Anna's voice was firm but warm, the voice of a woman who had learned to make do with little but would never compromise on certain standards. As they ate, Thomas shared news from town. The mill had reduced shifts again. 3 more families on their street would be without income by week's end. "The Sullivans are moving in with their parents in Pittsburgh," Thomas said between bites. "Can't blame them." "Poor Mary," Anna sighed. 4 children in that tiny house. Jack ate quietly, listening. He had already decided that he would contribute his entire pay from the repairs to the household rather than saving for the bicycle he'd been eyeing at Johnson's Hardware. Some things mattered more. After dinner, while the younger children did homework, Thomas beckoned Jack to follow him to the small den where he kept his military memorabilia. It wasn't much. The metal, some photographs, and a wooden box that remained locked at all times. Tonight, Thomas unlocked the box. "I've been meaning to show you this for some time," he said, his voice taking on a reverent quality Jack rarely heard. He carefully removed a stack of yellowed papers, revealing a leather-bound journal beneath. "It's time you understood what we're really doing in that shop." Jack took the journal reverently. Opening it revealed detailed technical drawings unlike anything he'd seen before. Mechanical systems, armor configurations, engine designs, all rendered with a precision that spoke of both engineering expertise and artistic skill. "That's the FT-17, Thomas pointed to a detailed cross-section. "The tank I commanded. French design, revolutionary for its time, fully rotating turret, two-man crew, changed warfare forever." Jack turned the pages slowly, absorbing the technical details with fascination. The Renault FT-17 was small by later standards, just 16.4 feet long and weighing under 7 tons. But its innovative design had established the pattern for virtually all tanks that followed. A rotating turret atop a tracked hull, with the engine in the rear and the driver in front. "We weren't just mechanics before the war," Thomas continued, pointing to earlier sketches. "Your grandfather designed artillery components. I was working on armored vehicle concepts when the war broke out." This was news to Jack. The family legacy ran deeper than he'd realized. The Harringtons had been building things that move and things that fight since before the Revolution. Thomas tapped the journal, sometimes both at once. He turned to a page showing a damaged FT-17 with detailed notes about its vulnerabilities. "This is why I insisted on the modifications. Standard model had the fuel tanks here." He pointed to an area directly beneath the crew compartment. "One hit and the whole thing would go up. Crew had no chance." "You changed it?" Jack asked, engrossed in the technical details. Thomas nodded, a hint of pride breaking through his usual stoicism. "Rerouted the fuel lines, added a simple baffle system, saved lives." He paused, his expression darkening. "Not enough of them, though." That night, Jack stayed up late reading his father's journal by flashlight. The technical details were fascinating, but it was the human element that captivated him most. His father's accounts of commanding the metal beast in battle, the terror and triumph, the brotherhood formed in the crucible of war. One entry in particular caught his attention. April 3rd, 1918. Outside Cantigny. "Bill Sherman saved my life today. Tank took direct hit. Ammunition cooking off. I was pinned. Sherman pulled me out before the whole thing went up. Lost his leg doing it. If I live through this hell, I'll never forget that debt." Jack had never heard of Bill Sherman. His father rarely spoke of specific comrades from the war. The name was filed away in Jack's mind, a piece of the puzzle that was his father's past. The next morning arrived with a banging on their front door before dawn. Jack was already up, helping his father with early preparations at the shop. Sheriff Miller stood on their porch, hat in hand, never a good sign. "Thomas, there's been an accident at the mill. They need you right away." Within minutes, Thomas was dressed and heading out the door, moving with a speed that belied his damaged leg. Jack opened the shop at the usual time. "Work on the Henderson tractor if no one brings in emergency work," he instructed, his voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. "Yes, sir." Jack watched his father limping down the street at the fastest pace his damaged leg would allow, a sense of foreboding settling in his stomach. That day moved with excruciating slowness. Few customers came to the shop. The town seemed to hold its breath. By noon, rumors began circulating. A catastrophic failure in one of the main furnaces. Men trapped. Rescue efforts underway. Jack kept the shop open as instructed, but his mind was at the mill. His father had been gone for hours. It was nearly dusk when Sheriff Miller's car pulled up outside the shop again. This time, Jack's mother was with him. Her eyes were red and swollen. Jack knew before a word was spoken. "There was an explosion," Sheriff Miller explained gently, removing his hat as he approached Jack at the workbench. "Your father was helping free trapped workers when a secondary blast occurred." The world seemed to tilt beneath Jack's feet. He gripped the workbench to steady himself, the cold metal anchoring him as the sheriff's words washed over him. "He saved 3 men before it happened," the sheriff continued, his voice thick with emotion. "He's a hero, son." Hero, the word echoed hollowly in Jack's mind. Heroes were supposed to come home. His father had already been a hero. He wasn't supposed to die in a steel mill in Pennsylvania. Not after surviving the trenches of France. How, Jack managed to ask, needing to understand. The sheriff exchanged a glance with Anna, who nodded slightly, her face a mask of grief barely contained. The main support beam was compromised. Thomas rigged a temporary brace to hold it while the trapped men escaped. He was the last one out when the secondary explosion hit. The beam, the sheriff didn't need to finish. Jack nodded numbly. It made sense. His father, the engineer, would have known exactly how to brace a failing structure, would have known the risks, would have stayed until the last man was safe. He didn't suffer, Jack, Sheriff Miller added softly. It was instantaneous. Cold comfort, but comfort nonetheless. Anna stepped forward, embracing her eldest son with a strength that surprised him. He was so proud of you, she whispered. So proud. The funeral was attended by the entire town. Thomas Harrington was laid to rest with full military honors. A congressman spoke of sacrifice and duty. Veterans stood at attention as the flag was folded and presented to Anna. Through it all, Jack remained stone-faced, the oldest son now the man of the house at 14. He didn't allow himself to cry, not even when the bugler played taps. His father wouldn't have cried. That evening, as relatives and neighbors filled their home with casseroles and condolences, a tall man in an army officer's uniform approached Jack. His silver hair and commanding presence parted the crowd naturally. Despite his advanced age, he stood ramrod straight, though Jack noticed the slight stiffness in his gait, particularly on the left side. You must be Jack, the man has said, extending his hand. I'm William Sherman. I served with your father. The name registered immediately. Bill Sherman, the man who had saved his father in France. Jack shook the offered hand, noting the firm grip despite the man's age. I came as soon as I heard, Sherman continued. Your father was the finest man I ever knew. Jack nodded, not trusting his voice. Sherman reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. He wanted you to have this when you were older, but I think now is the right time. Jack opened the box to find a smaller version of his father's Medal of Honor. It's a replica, Sherman explained. For the son of a recipient, not many people know they make these. Your father asked me to hold it for you. Thank you, sir. Jack finally managed, his fingers closing around the medal. Sherman placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. I owe your father my life, son, which means I owe it to you now, too. Before Jack could respond, Sherman was called away by another mourner. The brief exchange left Jack with more questions than answers, but the weight of the medal in his hand felt like a promise. That night, after everyone had gone and his exhausted mother and siblings had fallen into fitful sleep, Jack sat alone in his father's workshop. The familiar tools and machinery offered no comfort now. Everything looked different, as if the soul had been stripped from the place along with its master. On the workbench lay his father's pocket watch. Anna had pressed it into Jack's hand before bed. He would want you to have it, she'd said. Jack opened the watch, running his thumb over the cracked crystal. In that moment, he made a decision that would alter the course of his life. The shop would continue. The Harrington legacy would not end with Thomas. Jack would ensure that. But there was more. The journal with its tank designs called to him. There was a bigger world beyond Steelton, beyond the shop. A world his father had touched briefly before returning to Pennsylvania. Jack vowed he would find his way there someday. He closed the watch with a decisive snap. Time was moving forward whether he wanted it to or not. The only question was what he would do with it. Chapter 2, Forging the Future. 3 years transformed Jack Harrington from a boy to a man. At 17, he stood 6'1", his frame filled out from countless hours of physical labor. The Harrington machine shop had not merely survived, but thrived under his guidance. What had begun as a desperate attempt to keep his family afloat had evolved into something more. Jack had an intuitive understanding of mechanics that surpassed even his father's considerable skills. Word spread, customers came from neighboring counties. Anna Harrington had become the shop's business manager, handling accounts and customer relations with an efficiency that surprised even herself. Emma, now 15, proved to have her mother's head for figures, keeping the books with meticulous precision. The twins, 10 and already showing mechanical aptitude, helped with simple tasks after school. More importantly, Jack had continued his father's secret side work. Using the designs in the journal as a foundation, he experimented with his own improvements. Small-scale models of tank components lined the shelves of the back room, hidden from casual visitors. His modifications to the fuel routing system of the FT-17 had evolved into a comprehensive redesign that could potentially be applied to modern tanks. The morning mail brought an unexpected envelope, heavy cream paper with official-looking seals. Addressed to Mr. Jack Harrington. He opened it while eating breakfast, his mother watching curiously from across the table. The letter inside bore the seal of the United States Military Academy at West Point. Jack read it twice to be sure he understood. What is it? Anna asked, concern etched on her face. I've been offered a place at West Point. Full appointment. Jack looked up, stunned. I never applied. Anna's hand went to her throat. West Point? The military academy? Jack handed her the letter. The words swam before her eyes, but the meaning was clear. Her eldest son was being given an opportunity few received. Who would nominate you without telling us? She wondered aloud. The answer came that afternoon. A sleek black car with government plates pulled up outside the shop. Colonel William Sherman, now sporting a star on his shoulder, stepped out. General Sherman, Jack corrected himself as he wiped his hands to greet the visitor. Brigadier General, Sherman smiled. Not quite the full bird yet. How are you, Jack? Confused, sir. Did you have something to do with this? Jack held up the letter which he'd carried in his pocket all day. Sherman nodded, looking around the shop appreciatively. I've been keeping tabs on you. Your father would be proud of what you've done here. He ran a hand along a particularly complex piece of machinery Jack had recently rebuilt, a hydraulic system from a naval gun turret that no one else in the county had been willing to attempt. But this isn't where you belong, son. Not with that mind of yours. Jack felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride at the recognition, uncertainty about leaving his family, and something else. A hunger for something beyond Steelton that he'd kept buried. My family needs me here, he said, though without conviction. Sherman fixed him with a penetrating stare. Your country needs you more, and it's what Thomas would have wanted. That evening, Jack sat with his mother at the kitchen table after the younger children were in bed. The acceptance letter lay between them. I can't leave you all, Jack insisted. The shop, the income. Anna reached across the table and took his hand. At 43, she looked older, the years since Thomas's death having taken their toll. But there was steel in her eyes that reminded Jack that his father hadn't been the only source of strength in the family. Jack Harrington, don't you dare use us as an excuse. He blinked, surprised by her vehemence. Your father dreamed of more for you than this town, and you've done your duty to this family 10 times over. Her voice softened. It's time for you to live your own life. But how will you manage? Anna straightened. Emma can help run the office. We'll hire Davy Miller to handle the physical work. He's been apprenticing with you for 2 years now. She squeezed his hand. We'll be fine. This is your chance to do something extraordinary. She reached into her apron pocket and withdrew a small envelope. I found this in your father's papers after we lost him. I think now is the time for you to read it. Jack opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. His father's distinctive handwriting covering both sides. My son, it began, if you're reading this, I'm no longer there to guide you. But I've watched you grow, seen the spark in you that burns brighter than it ever did in me. The Harrington legacy isn't just about machines and metal, Jack. It's about service, about using our God-given talents to protect those who can't protect themselves. I never told you much about the war. Some things are too terrible to share. But what I did tell you about the tanks, that it wasn't just history. It was a door I was trying to open for you. If you're reading this, someone else has opened it instead. Walk through it, son. The world needs minds like yours. The watch I leave you isn't just a timepiece. It's a reminder that each of us has only so many hours. Use yours wisely. Make something of yourself beyond what Steelton can offer. Make me prouder than I already am. Your loving father, Thomas. Jack folded the letter carefully, his decision made. That night, he couldn't sleep. He went to the workshop and pulled out his father's journal again. The tank design seemed to speak to him. There was a war brewing in Europe. Everyone knew it, even if America was pretending otherwise. If it came, armor would play a crucial role. Perhaps this was where the Harrington legacy was meant to lead. Summer 1938 arrived with brutal heat as Jack stepped off the train at Highland Falls, New York. The Hudson River Valley stretched before him, a world away from the industrial landscape of Pennsylvania. West Point was everything the pictures had suggested and more. Gothic architecture rose imposingly against the blue sky. Young men from across the nation converged on the academy, all in identical confusion as they began their transformation from civilians to cadets. Jack quickly discovered he was different from most of his classmates. Many came from wealthy families or military dynasties. The son of a small-town machinist with only a high school education stood out. His calloused hands and practical knowledge marked him as working class in an environment that subtly favored the elite. Harrington, you're bunking with me. A tall, slender young man with wire-rimmed glasses approached. Samuel Miller, Boston. Everyone calls me Doc. Jack shook the offered hand. Samuel's grip was surprisingly firm despite his academic appearance. Jack Harrington, Steelton, Pennsylvania. The machine shop guy? Doc's eyebrows rose. Scuttlebutt says you rebuilt an entire paper mill turbine by yourself. Jack shifted uncomfortably. Word travels fast. Small class. Only about 600 of us. Doc grinned, and General Sherman apparently tells everyone who'll listen that you're some kind of mechanical prodigy. Doc's background couldn't have been more different from Jack's. His father was a prominent surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital, his mother from Old Boston Money. He had attended Phillips Exeter Academy and been accepted to Harvard Medical School before surprising everyone by choosing West Point instead. My father expects me to be a surgeon like him, Doc explained that evening as they arranged their Spartan quarters. But I've seen enough of civilian medicine to know it's not for me. Military medicine, that's where the real innovations happen. Battlefield necessity driving medical advancement. Jack appreciated Doc's passion for his chosen field. It echoed his own feelings about engineering. The first weeks were a blur of physical training, academic orientation, and the endless minutiae of military discipline. Jack excelled at the physical aspects, his years of manual labor having prepared him well. The academic challenges were more daunting, but not insurmountable. The plebe year at West Point was designed to break civilian habits and rebuild cadets as military officers. Jack adapted better than most, accustomed to discipline and hard work. Doc struggled more with the physical demands, but compensated with academic brilliance. It was during an engineering lecture that Jack first truly stood out. Major Patton, a legendary tank commander from the Great War, was guest speaking about armored warfare. The tank is only as effective as its mechanical reliability, Patton declared, his commanding presence filling the lecture hall. In North Africa, the Germans and Italians lost more vehicles to mechanical failure than to enemy fire. He projected a slide showing a tank transmission. This gentleman is often the weakest link. Jack studied the image, frowning slightly. He designed something similar, but with crucial differences. The configuration shown would lead to excessive heat buildup in desert conditions, causing premature failure of the seals. After class, against all protocol, he approached the major. "Sir, I noticed the transfer case design on that transmission. It seems vulnerable to desert conditions." Patton turned, surprised at the cadet's temerity. "Is that so, Mr. Harrington, sir? The sand would infiltrate those seals within hours, but a double barrier system with pressurized lubricant would solve the problem." Instead of the reprimand Jack expected, Patton studied him with new interest. "Draw it for me, Harrington." That evening, Jack sketched his design, refining details until well past midnight. Doc watched with fascination. "You really understand this stuff, don't you?" Jack looked up from his drawing. "My father taught me. He commanded a tank in France." "My father's a surgeon," Doc offered. "Expected me to follow him into medicine." "Why didn't you?" Doc's expression hardened slightly. "Some of us want to write our own stories." The next day, Major Patton examined Jack's design with growing interest. "This is unconventional, Cadet Harrington, but damn if it doesn't make sense." He looked at Jack with new respect. "You've thought about armored warfare before?" "Yes, sir. My father's journals." "Thomas Harrington," Patton nodded. "I knew of him. Good man." Jack was stunned. "You knew my father?" "By reputation, armor is a small community." Patton rolled up the drawing. "I'm keeping this. You may have something valuable here." Word spread quickly. Jack found himself approached by upperclassmen interested in his mechanical insights. Even some faculty began treating him with a deference unusual for a plebe. Not everyone appreciated the attention. Cadet Howard Prescott, third-generation West Point and old money, took particular exception. "Heard you've been showing off for Patton," Prescott cornered Jack in the barracks. "Designing tanks in your spare time, grease monkey?" Jack kept his expression neutral. "Just answering questions, Prescott." "Know your place," Prescott sneered. "West Point isn't for glorified mechanics." "Back off, Prescott." Doc stepped between them. Despite his academic appearance, there was unexpected authority in his voice. Prescott measured the situation and withdrew, muttering about scholarship cases. "Thanks," Jack said when he'd gone. Doc shrugged. "Can't stand entitled jerks. My family's got money too, but that doesn't make us better than anyone." A week later, Jack met the other two men who would change the course of his life. Eduardo Eddie Rodriguez was a mathematical genius from El Paso, Texas, the son of Mexican immigrants who had worked his way into West Point through sheer brilliance and determination. Benjamin Bull Thompson was a farm boy from Kansas, 6'4" of solid muscle with a mind as powerful as his physique. Eddie's father had crossed the border legally in 1910, finding work as a mechanic in El Paso. His mathematical ability had been evident from childhood, solving complex equations that baffled his teachers. A sympathetic high school principal had secured him a scholarship to Texas A&M, where he'd excelled before receiving an appointment to West Point. Numbers are a universal language, Eddie explained to Jack during their first study session together. They don't care where you came from or what you look like. They just demand respect. Bull Thompson's background was quintessentially American. His family had farmed the same land in Kansas since the 1860s. The Depression had hit them hard, but they had survived through a combination of hard work and innovative farming practices that Bull's father had pioneered. Dad figured out crop rotation patterns nobody else was using, Bull explained in his deep, measured voice. Mathematically optimized for soil conditions, kept us going when other farms failed. Bull had the strength of a man who had spent his life working the land, but his true gift was spatial reasoning. He could visualize complex three-dimensional systems with uncanny accuracy, a talent that made him exceptional in engineering and tactical planning. They met in the engineering lab, all four tackling the same complex problem from different angles. When they compared notes, they realized they had complementary skills. Jack's practical mechanics, Doc's analytical thinking, Eddie's mathematical precision, and Bull's spatial reasoning created a synergy that was greater than the sum of its parts. They began studying together regularly. Doc dubbed them the Steel Brotherhood after they aced a project designing a bridge support structure. To the Steel Brotherhood, he declared, raising a contraband soda in their hidden study spot behind the library. Because steel is stronger when properly alloyed. Jack smiled at the metaphor. Different elements, stronger together. As their first year progressed, the four became inseparable. They pushed each other academically and physically. Jack taught the others practical mechanics. Doc shared his knowledge of anatomy and medicine. Eddie tutored them in advanced mathematics. Bull, raised on a working farm, contributed practical knowledge about terrain, weather, and large-scale operations. They were an unlikely group, but their friendship forged something special at West Point. The rigors of the academy tempered them. The Beast Barracks summer training before their second year tested their physical limits. Academic challenges pushed their mental capabilities. Military disciplines shaped their characters. Their junior year brought specialization. Jack focused on mechanical engineering with an emphasis on powertrains and armored vehicle design. Doc pursued medical studies with a concentration on trauma treatment. Eddie specialized in ballistics and fire control systems. Bull's focus became logistics and field engineering. Jack's relationship with General Sherman deepened during this period. The older man became a mentor, sharing insights from his long military career and offering guidance on Jack's technical projects. "Your father had a gift for seeing vulnerabilities in designs that others missed," Sherman told him during one of their regular meetings. "You've inherited that gift. Use it wisely." Sherman also shared stories of Thomas Harrington that Jack had never heard. Tales of his father's courage under fire, his innovative thinking in combat situations, and his unwavering commitment to protecting his men. He modified his tank's fuel system after seeing what happened to other crews, Sherman explained. Command wouldn't approve the changes officially, so he did it himself, in the field. Then taught other crews to do the same, saved countless lives. The image of his father as a battlefield innovator, not just a decorated soldier, resonated deeply with Jack. It aligned with the technical journals he'd discovered and explained his father's insistence on practical, field-tested designs. The years passed quickly. News from Europe grew increasingly dire. Hitler's Germany annexed Austria, then Czechoslovakia. War seemed inevitable. In their final year, as the class of 1942 prepared to graduate into what everyone now acknowledged would be a global conflict, Jack received a summons to the commandant's office. General Sherman was waiting for him. "Jack, sit down." Sherman gestured to a chair. "I have something important to discuss." Jack sat, curious and slightly apprehensive. "You've distinguished yourself here," Sherman began. "Top of your class in mechanical engineering. Outstanding tactical scores. Natural leader." "Thank you, sir." Sherman slid a folder across the desk. "The Army is developing a new medium tank, the M4. They're calling it the Sherman." Jack raised an eyebrow at the name. Sherman smiled slightly. "Not named for me, despite what some jokers are saying, but I've been asked to assemble a team of young officers to work on the project after graduation." Jack opened the folder. Technical specifications for a tank, unlike anything in America's current arsenal, stared back at him. The M4 Sherman would be a 33-ton medium tank armed with a 75mm gun, powered by a 400-horsepower radial engine. Its design incorporated lessons learned from the European conflict, balancing firepower, protection, and mobility. I want you on that team, Jack. You and your steel brotherhood. Jack looked up in surprise. How do you know about that? I make it my business to know. Sherman leaned forward. This tank will be the backbone of our armored forces if we enter the war. We need men who understand both the technical and tactical aspects. A surge of excitement ran through Jack. This was everything he'd worked toward, a chance to continue the Harrington legacy in a meaningful way. There's something else you should know, Sherman added more somberly. He opened a drawer and removed an envelope, yellowed with age. Jack recognized his father's handwriting on the front. Your father left this with me before he died. Asked me to give it to you when the time was right. Jack took the envelope with trembling hands. I think now is that time, Sherman said gently. Read it privately. We'll talk tomorrow. That evening, Jack sat alone in his dormitory while his roommates were at dinner. The envelope felt unnaturally heavy in his hands. Finally, he broke the seal. My dear son, if you're reading this, then Bill Sherman has judged you ready, and I am no longer there to tell you myself. There are things about our family you should know. The Harringtons have served this nation since before it was a nation. Your great-grandfather designed cannon carriages for the Union Army. His father crafted rifles for Washington's forces. We are builders, Jack, builders of the tools that keep America free. In France, I learned the terrible responsibility that comes with this calling. The machines we create deal in human lives. They must work perfectly. They must protect our boys. They must help end conflicts as quickly as possible. Bill Sherman saved my life when my tank was hit. He pulled me out despite the flames, losing his leg in the process. I owe him everything, including the life I built with your mother and you, my son. He promised to watch over you if anything happened to me. If you're reading this at West Point, then he has kept that promise. Whatever path you choose, remember this. Engineering is not just about machines. It's about the people those machines serve and protect. I am proud of you, Jack. Make your own legacy. With all my love, your father, Thomas. Tears streamed down Jack's face for the first time since his father's funeral. The letter connected the past to the present in a way that made his path forward suddenly clear. The next morning, Jack met with Sherman again. I'll join the tank program, sir, he said without preamble. And I know the others will too. Sherman nodded, satisfied. I never doubted it. There's one more thing. He handed Jack a small box. Inside was a set of gold second lieutenant bars. You'll be commissioned early, all 4 of you. The program needs you now. Jack stared at the bars, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. There's a train leaving for Aberdeen Proving Grounds tomorrow morning. Your new assignment begins there. Yes, sir. Jack came to attention and saluted crisply. Sherman returned the salute, then did something unexpected. He embraced Jack briefly. Your father would be proud, he said quietly. As am I. That night, the Steel Brotherhood gathered in their secret spot one last time. Jack explained their new assignment. Early commissioning, Doc whistled. My father will finally shut up about medical school. Tank design, Eddie grinned. Perfect for us. Bull simply nodded his massive head. When do we start? Jack looked at his friends, these men who had become his brothers in all but blood. Tomorrow, we ship out at 0600. They raised their sodas in a final toast. To the Steel Brotherhood, Doc began. And the tanks will build, Eddie added. To victory, Bull rumbled. Jack completed the toast with his father's words. And to the men those tanks will protect. As graduation approached for the rest of their class, the 4 newly minted lieutenants were already deep into their work at Aberdeen. The M4 Sherman tank prototype was taking shape, incorporating ideas from each of them. Jack's redesigned transmission, Doc's improved crew ergonomics, Eddie's ballistic calculations for the main gun, Bull's enhanced suspension system for rough terrain. The prototype M4 Sherman was a significant advancement over previous American tanks. Its 75mm gun provided good anti-infantry capability and adequate anti-armor performance against early war German tanks. The R-975 radial aircraft engine delivered reliable power, though Jack had concerns about its use of gasoline rather than diesel fuel. The suspension system, designed with Bull's input, offered excellent cross-country mobility. Still, Jack identified potential issues. The high silhouette made it an easier target. The gasoline engine created a fire risk if penetrated. The armor, while adequate against early war threats, might prove insufficient as German anti-tank weapons evolved. He documented these concerns meticulously, proposing modifications that could address each vulnerability. Some were implemented immediately. Others were deemed too complex for the initial production models, but noted for future variants. It was during a late-night testing session that Jack met Catherine Sullivan. The crash of equipment brought him running to the adjacent lab, where a young woman was attempting to move a heavy armor plate by herself. "Let me help with that," Jack rushed forward. "I had it balanced until someone slammed a door," she retorted, blowing a strand of auburn hair from her face. Despite her protestations, Jack helped stabilize the plate. "Lieutenant Jack Harrington," he introduced himself, noticing her civilian clothes. "You're not military." "Dr. Catherine Sullivan," she replied, "metallurgical engineering. And no, I'm a civilian contractor." Jack's eyebrows rose. Female doctors of any kind were rare, especially in engineering fields. "You look surprised, Lieutenant." Her green eyes challenged him. "Impressed," he corrected. "We need the best minds on this project." She studied him a moment as if deciding whether to be offended. "Well, while you boys have been focused on the engine and guns, someone needs to make sure the armor actually stops bullets." Jack noticed the test plates behind her, each marked with impact points and detailed notes. "Sloped armor," he observed. "That's forward thinking." Something in his tone must have conveyed genuine respect, because her defensive posture relaxed slightly. "The Germans are already using it. We've seen the results from captured Panzer IIIs. With the right angle, we can effectively double the protection without adding weight." Jack examined her work with growing admiration. The armor plates showed a methodical progression of tests, each building on the last. Different angles, different thicknesses, different impact velocities, all meticulously documented. The data supported her conclusions about the effectiveness of sloped armor. "This is brilliant work," he said sincerely. "The current Sherman design has vertical armor plates in several critical areas. Try telling that to the colonels upstairs." Her frustration was evident. "They keep rejecting my recommendations as too radical and unnecessarily complex for production." "Maybe they'd listen to an officer," Jack suggested. She gave him a measured look. "Are you offering to help, Lieutenant Harrington?" "Jack," he corrected. "And yes, this could save lives." "Kate," she offered in return, "and I might just take you up on that." Over the following weeks, Jack brought Kate's armor designs to the attention of the project leaders, backing them with his own technical credibility. The Steel Brotherhood added their support, recognizing the value of her innovations. Kate's background was as impressive as her work. Her father had been a renowned metallurgist who had pioneered advanced steel alloys for naval applications. She had followed in his footsteps, earning her doctorate from MIT at a time when few women were accepted into such programs. The war had brought her to Aberdeen, where her expertise in armor composition was crucial to the tank development program. "My father always said that engineering is the art of compromise," she told Jack one evening as they worked late. "But he also said some compromises aren't worth making. Protection for the crews is one of those." Gradually, her designs were incorporated into the evolving Sherman prototype. The frontal hull received additional slope, and the turret design was modified to reduce shot traps where incoming rounds could be captured rather than deflected. Their professional collaboration evolved during long evenings in the lab. Kate was unlike any woman Jack had known. Brilliant, determined, uncompromising in her standards. "My father designed armor plate for battleships," she explained as they worked together on a new testing protocol. "He taught me metallurgy before I knew how to dance." Jack smiled. "My father taught me to rebuild engines before I could ride a bicycle." Their shared background created an understanding that went beyond words. Both had grown up in the shadow of engineering legacies. Both felt the responsibility of creating weapons that would protect American soldiers. The Steel Brotherhood welcomed Kate into their technical discussions without hesitation. Doc appreciated her insights on crew protection. Eddie found her mathematical approach to armor calculation compatible with his own methodology. Bulge's spatial reasoning complemented her materials science expertise. As 1941 progressed, the prototype Sherman took final shape. Production plans were being finalized, with the first unit scheduled to begin rolling off assembly lines by early 1942. "They're rushing it," Jack commented during a review session with the Brotherhood. "There are still improvements we could make." "War doesn't wait for perfect solutions," Doc reminded him. "The situation in Europe and North Africa is deteriorating rapidly." "Which is exactly why we need to get it right," Jack insisted. "Once these tanks go into combat, crews will pay for any shortcuts we take now." That conviction drove Jack to work tirelessly on final refinements. His focus on crew protection became almost obsessive, informed by his father's experiences. Every component was evaluated not just for performance, but for how it would affect the men inside when the tank was hit, because tanks inevitably were hit in combat. On a rare weekend pass in November, Jack took Kate to dinner in Baltimore. Away from the base, they could simply be a man and woman enjoying each other's company. They're starting production next month, Jack said over dessert. Initial order is 1,000 units. Kate's eyes widened. So soon, I thought final testing wasn't complete. War waits for no tank, Jack quoted their project leader. The situation in Europe is deteriorating. North Africa, too. Do you think America will enter the war? Kate asked quietly. Jack nodded slowly. It's only a matter of time. When we do, these tanks will be our backbone. Then we better make damn sure they work. Kate's expression was solemn. Jack reached across the table and took her hand. That's why I have something to ask you. Her eyebrow raised questioningly. Your armor modifications made a critical difference. But I've been thinking about the fuel system. It's still vulnerable. Kate leaned forward, instantly engaged. The placement behind the crew compartment? Exactly. If the tank is penetrated there, the gasoline ignites explosively. The crew has seconds to escape, if that. You're thinking of a diesel conversion, like the Russians are doing with their T-30? Jack shook his head. Not enough time to redesign the powertrain completely. But we could create a buffer system, armor baffles between the engine compartment and crew space, combined with an automated fire suppression system. Kate's mind was already racing with possibilities. We'd need to redesign the bulkhead completely, and the suppression system would require a reliable triggering mechanism that wouldn't activate accidentally. I have some ideas, but I need your metallurgical expertise. Jack Harrington, are you asking me to collaborate on an unauthorized modification to a U.S. Army tank? A smile played at her lips. For the sake of the crews, absolutely. His expression was earnest. The official design is locked in, but we could document the improvements for later variants. Kate's smile widened. I thought you'd never ask. Their unofficial collaboration began that night, sketches drawn on restaurant napkins becoming detailed plans in the following weeks. They worked in their scarce free time, creating a comprehensive proposal for improving the Sherman's survivability. December 7, 1941, dawned cold and clear at Aberdeen Proving Grounds. The Steel Brotherhood was conducting field tests on the Sherman prototype, pushing it through difficult terrain to evaluate Bulge's suspension modifications. Jack stood in the commander's hatch, the wind whipping his face as the 33-ton vehicle powered up a steep incline. Doc was beside him recording performance data. Eddie operated the main gun, ensuring the stabilization system functioned during movement. Bull drove with the instinctive skill that had made him their default driver. The tank radio crackled with an unexpected message. All units return to base immediately. Repeat, all units return to base. Jack frowned, checking his watch. They were scheduled for another hour of testing. Roger that, returning to base, over. He tapped Bull's shoulder. Take us home. The massive Sherman turned smoothly, its tracks digging into the Maryland soil as it headed back toward the compound. As they approached, Jack noticed unusual activity. Personnel running between buildings, vehicles being moved with urgency. Something's happened, Doc observed needlessly. They parked the Sherman in its designated spot and climbed out. A sergeant was waiting for them. Lieutenant Harrington, you and your team are ordered to report to Colonel Devers immediately. What's going on, Sergeant? Jack asked as they hurried toward headquarters. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, sir. It's all over the radio. The four men exchanged glances, the significance immediately clear. We're at war, Doc said quietly. Colonel Devers was standing over a radio when they entered his office. Other officers were gathered around, faces grim. He looked up as the Steel Brotherhood entered. Gentlemen, the situation has changed dramatically. As of this morning, the United States is at war with the Empire of Japan. He gestured to a map of the Pacific. The attack was centered on our naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Casualties are significant. Much of the Pacific Fleet is damaged or destroyed. Jack felt a cold knot in his stomach. The scale of the disaster was difficult to comprehend. Sir, how does this affect our project? He asked. Fundamentally, Lieutenant. Devers turned to face them fully. The Sherman just became the most important weapon in America's arsenal. We need to accelerate production dramatically. He pointed to another map showing Europe and North Africa. While our focus shifts to Japan, we cannot abandon our allies fighting Hitler. The Sherman will be our primary contribution to that theater for the immediate future. Devers pulled 4 envelopes from his desk. These are your new orders, effective immediately. Lieutenant Harrington, you're promoted to captain and assigned to command a company in the 2nd Armored Division. Jack blinked in surprise. Sir, we need officers who understand these machines intimately. You 4 designed them. Now you'll lead them in combat. He distributed the remaining envelopes. Lieutenant Miller, you're our new liaison to British tank forces. Lieutenant Rodriguez, you'll lead our technical support team in North Africa. Lieutenant Thompson, you're assigned to training command, teaching crews how to get the most from these vehicles. The four friends stood in stunned silence, the sudden shift in their trajectory sinking in. Gentlemen, you have 48 hours to complete handover of your technical duties and report to your new commands. Devers' expression softened slightly. You've done exceptional work here. Now your country needs you in different roles. They saluted crisply and filed out of the office. In the hallway, the reality of their situation hit home. After years together, the Steel Brotherhood was being separated. North Africa, Eddie shook his head. Never thought I'd see combat. Training command makes sense, Bull rumbled. But I'd rather be in the fight. England, Doc seemed contemplative. Could be worse. Jack was still processing his own assignment. Company command, responsible for 16 Sherman tanks and their crews, men whose lives would depend on the very machines he had helped design. We need to meet tonight, he said decisively. My quarters, 2,000 hours. As the others headed off to begin their transitions, Jack sought out Kate. He found her in her lab, radio tuned to the ongoing news coverage. It's awful, she looked up as he entered. All those men? Jack nodded grimly. I've been reassigned. We're all being sent to combat units. Kate's face paled. When? 48 hours. He took her hands. I'm being sent to the 2nd Armored, Hell on Wheels Division. Jack, her voice caught. I need to show you something before I go. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket and opened it to a detailed technical drawing. Your armor modifications and my fuel system redesign combined. Kate studied the drawing, her engineer's mind automatically analyzing the design even as her heart processed the imminent separation. This would work, she said finally. It would save lives. I want you to continue developing it, Jack urged. Get it into production models. I'll send field reports directly to you. Kate nodded, then reached into her desk drawer. She withdrew a folder. Then you should take this. It's a modification to the gun stabilization system. Increases first-round hit probability by 30%. Jack took the folder reverently. This could make all the difference. That's the idea. Her voice was steady now, professional, but her eyes betrayed deeper emotions. That evening, the Steel Brotherhood gathered one final time in Jack's quarters. Maps were spread across the table as they discussed the global situation. North Africa is the key right now. Jack traced the battle lines. Rommel's Africa Corps has pushed the British back to Egypt. Our tanks will face German Panthers and Tigers, Eddie noted. They outgun and outarmor the Sherman in its current form, which is why your technical support will be crucial. Jack pointed at him. Field modifications. Immediate feedback. He turned to Doc. In England, you'll be our voice with the British. Make sure they understand the Sherman's strengths and limitations. Doc nodded, and feed their combat experiences back to production. Bull, you'll be training the crews that will join us later. Make sure they know every inch of these machines. The big man from Kansas nodded solemnly. They'll be ready. Jack stood back, looking at his friends. We designed this tank together. Now we'll make sure it wins this war. Apart but still united. The Steel Brotherhood, Doc raised his coffee mug. The Steel Brotherhood, the others echoed. The bond they had forged at West Point would now be tested in the crucible of global war. Their technical knowledge would be translated into battlefield reality. The machines they had designed would carry American soldiers into combat across 2 continents. And Jack Harrington, son of a tank commander from the Great War, would follow in his father's footsteps, leading men into battle from the commander's hatch of a Sherman tank. The legacy continued, steel upon steel, generation to generation. The watch in his pocket kept counting the time to serve, the time to protect, the time to fulfill the promise of the Harrington name. Chapter 3, Into the Fire. On his final day at Aberdeen, Jack sought out Kate one last time. They met at sunrise on the test range, the partially dismantled Sherman prototype silhouetted against the pink sky. I'll write when I can, Jack promised. Those sensors will limit technical details. Kate nodded, her professional composure firmly in place. I'll continue our work here. When you return, we'll implement everything. Jack hesitated, then reached into his pocket. His father's watch sat heavy in his palm. I want you to keep this, he said, pressing it into her hand, for safekeeping. Kate looked down at the battered timepiece, understanding its significance. Jack, I can't. Please, it gives me a reason to come back. She closed her fingers around the watch, then reached up and kissed him with unexpected passion. You'd better. she whispered against his lips. As the morning sun crested the horizon, casting long shadows from the tanks that would soon carry America into war, Jack Harrington embraced the woman who had captured his heart and the future that awaited them both. The steel had been forged, now it would be tested in fire. Jack's journey to his new command took him first to Fort Knox, Kentucky, for abbreviated company commander training. The normal course had been condensed from 12 weeks to just 4, another sign of the war's acceleration. The compressed schedule left little time for reflection. Days were filled with tactical exercises, administrative procedures, and personnel management training. Nights were dedicated to studying the technical manuals for every vehicle in an armored company. Jack absorbed it all with the focused intensity that had characterized his academic career. But his mind often returned to the Sherman tanks waiting for him. Machines he had helped design now being mass-produced to carry men into combat. In late January 1942, he reported to Camp Polk, Louisiana, where the 2nd Armored Division was preparing for deployment. The Hell on Wheels Division had been formed in July 1940 as part of the Army's expansion, but it remained undermanned and under-equipped until Pearl Harbor changed everything. Now the camp bustled with activity as men and machines poured in. Fresh recruits trained alongside veteran NCOs. Newly manufactured tanks arrived daily on railroad cars, their paint barely dry. Jack's company, Charlie Company of the 66th Armor Regiment, consisted of 16 Sherman tanks organized into 4 platoons of 4 tanks each, on paper at least. Reality was less impressive. When Jack arrived, only 9 tanks had been delivered, and many of his assigned crew members were still in basic training. His first task was to assess what he did have. The senior NCOs were his most valuable asset, experienced men who had been in the Army for years, though few had actual combat experience. First Sergeant William Davis became Jack's right hand. A 20-year veteran who had served in the horse cavalry before transitioning to armor, Davis had the weathered face and steady demeanor of a man who had seen it all. "Most of these boys have never seen the inside of a tank before, sir," Davis informed Jack during their first meeting. "We've got mechanics who've only worked on trucks, gunners who've never fired anything bigger than a .30 caliber, and drivers fresh off the farm." "Then we start with basics, Sergeant," Jack replied. "I want every man to know every position in the tank. Drivers learn gunnery, gunners learn driving, everyone learns maintenance." Davis nodded approvingly. "Cross-training, good idea, sir. Might save lives when we're in the thick of it." The training schedule Jack established was grueling. 14-hour days, 7 days a week. Physical conditioning, technical instruction, tactical exercises, maintenance procedures, gunnery practice when ammunition was available, which wasn't often enough. He implemented innovations based on his design experience. Modified maintenance protocols that addressed known weaknesses in the transmission. Enhanced fire control procedures derived from Eddy's ballistic calculations. Crew ergonomics improvements suggested by Doc. When more tanks and personnel arrived, Jack reorganized the company. He placed his strongest crews in the lead tanks of each platoon, partnering experienced NCOs with promising but green officers. His own command tank received the best crew he could assemble, men who would serve as demonstrators and trainers for the rest of the company. His driver, Corporal Jenkins, had been a bulldozer operator in civilian life. The gunner, Sergeant Collins, had been a competitive marksman before the war. His loader, Private Wilson, was a former high school football star with the strength and coordination to handle the heavy 75mm shells. The radio operator/bow gunner, Private First Class Martinez, had worked as a radio repairman and spoke both English and Spanish fluently, making him valuable in North Africa. As they trained, Jack received letters from the scattered brotherhood. Doc wrote from England, where he was working with British tank units using American-supplied Shermans. Eddy sent reports from the North African desert, where American technical advisors were supporting British operations against Rommel. Bull's letters from Fort Knox described the challenges of preparing tank crews on an accelerated schedule. Kate's letters were more personal, though still focused primarily on technical matters. She continued their work on the fuel system modifications, encountering resistance but making gradual progress with production authorities. Her latest note had mentioned a promising new armor composition that could improve protection without adding significant weight. By April, Charlie Company had reached full strength and completed its training cycle. The tanks were painted in desert tan, and tropical equipment was issued to all personnel. Their destination was obvious to everyone: North Africa, where American forces would soon join the British in confronting the German Africa Corps. The night before their departure, Jack gathered his officers for a final briefing. Lieutenants Parker, Harding, Wilson, and Rodriguez, no relation to Eddie, commanded his 4 platoons. All were West Point graduates, though several years ahead of Jack. The age difference was minimal, but the responsibility gap was enormous. "Gentlemen, tomorrow we ship out," Jack began, standing before the map of North Africa that dominated his office wall. "In approximately 3 weeks, we'll be facing German armor in combat. I want to make sure we're clear on what that means." He pointed to a technical diagram of a Panzer IV, the standard German tank they were likely to encounter. "Their main gun outranges ours. Their crews have been fighting for 2 years or more. They know the terrain better than we do." The officers exchanged glances, sobered by this frank assessment. "But," Jack continued, "our Sherman has advantages they can't match. Better reliability, better mobility, faster turret traverse, superior optics, and most importantly, we have you and your men." He looked each officer in the eye. "You've been trained not just to operate these tanks, but to understand them, to know their strengths and weaknesses intimately. That knowledge will keep your crews alive and make you effective against an experienced enemy." Lieutenant Parker raised a concern that had been whispered throughout the company. "Sir, we've heard the Sherman's armor can't stand up to the German 88. Jack nodded, appreciating the direct question. "That's correct, Lieutenant. The 80mm anti-tank gun will penetrate our armor at most combat ranges. That's why we've trained extensively on mobility tactics. We don't try to outslug a superior weapon. We maneuver, we flank, we use terrain to our advantage." He moved to another diagram, showing the vulnerable points of a Sherman. "Every man in this company knows these vulnerabilities because I've made sure they do. Knowledge is protection. A crew that understands where they're most at risk can position their tank to minimize that risk." The honesty seemed to reassure rather than discourage his officers. They appreciated serving under a commander who wouldn't send them into battle with false confidence. "One last thing," Jack added. "I've arranged for our tanks to receive some special modifications before they're loaded on the transport ships. Additional armor welded to the ammunition storage areas, enhanced fire suppression systems, improved transmission cooling." The officers looked surprised but pleased. "How did you manage that, sir?" Lieutenant Rodriguez asked. Jack smiled slightly. "Let's just say I have friends in the technical development branch. These modifications aren't standard issue yet, but they've been tested and approved for field implementation." What he didn't mention was that Kate had personally traveled to the port to oversee the modifications, working through official channels but expediting the process through her connections. "Questions?" Jack asked, concluding the briefing. Lieutenant Wilson spoke up. "Sir, what's your assessment of how long this campaign will take?" Jack considered the question carefully. "The Germans are overextended. Their supply lines are stretched across the Mediterranean. If we can push them back from Egypt and secure North Africa, we'll have the launching point for operations against Sicily and Italy." He traced the likely campaign path on the map. "But Rommel is a brilliant tactician, and German equipment is excellent. This won't be easy or quick. I'd estimate at least 6 months of hard fighting before North Africa is secure." It was a sobering assessment, but an honest one. The officers nodded, appreciating the candid evaluation. "Get some sleep, gentlemen. Tomorrow begins our real mission." After they departed, Jack wrote 2 final letters before shipping out. The first was to his mother and siblings, expressing his pride in them and his confidence in their ability to maintain the shop in his absence. He enclosed a photograph of himself in his captain's uniform, standing beside a Sherman tank. The second letter was to Kate. More personal than their usual correspondence, it acknowledged the feelings that had developed between them while maintaining the professional focus that characterized their relationship. He detailed the modifications being implemented on his tanks, promising to provide combat evaluation of their effectiveness. He concluded with a reference to the watch she now safeguarded. "It has counted the hours of one Harrington in combat already. Now it will count the hours until this Harrington returns to continue our work together. Both the technical work and whatever else might develop between a tank designer and a metallurgist who share a vision of better machines and a better world after this war ends." As he sealed the envelope, Jack felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. Soon he would lead men into combat in machines he had helped design. Their lives would depend on his decisions, his leadership, and the technical choices he had made at Aberdeen. The theoretical had become practical. The engineering abstractions were now life-and-death realities. The Steel Brotherhood's work would be tested not in laboratories, but on the battlefield. Jack Harrington, son of a tank commander, was about to follow in his father's tracks, but with knowledge, technology, and purpose that Thomas Harrington could only have dreamed of. The legacy continued, advancing with each generation, adapting to new challenges while maintaining the core principle that had guided the Harringtons for generations. Engineering is not just about machines, it's about the people those machines serve and protect. Chapter 4, Baptism by Fire. The North African sun beat down mercilessly as Captain Jack Harrington stood in the commander's hatch of his Sherman tank, scanning the horizon through binoculars. The vast desert stretched before him, the heat creating shimmering mirages that complicated observation. 3 weeks of sea travel had delivered Charlie Company to Casablanca, followed by a grueling rail and road journey eastward to join the American forces gathering for Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of Axis-held North Africa. Now they were positioned near the Tunisian border, preparing for their first combat operation. Jack lowered his binoculars, his face already weathered by the harsh desert conditions despite their brief time in theater. He dropped down into the turret where the temperature approached 120 degrees despite the open hatches. "Status report," he ordered, his voice steady despite the tension coiling inside him. "Engine temperature normal, fuel at 95%, reported Jenkins from the driver's position. "Main gun and cokes checked and ready," Collins added from the gunner's seat. "Radio check complete, all platoons reporting ready," Martinez confirmed from his radio operator station. "Ammunition stowed and secured," Wilson completed the checklist from the loader's position. Jack nodded, satisfied with his crew's preparation. "First combat operation, gentlemen. Everything we've trained for comes down to this." The mission was straightforward on paper. Charlie Company would support an infantry advance to capture a strategic crossroads currently held by German forces. Intelligence reported a mixed enemy force including infantry, artillery, and a small number of Panzer IIIs and IVs. "Remember, we engage at optimum range. Don't let them draw us into their kill zone." Jack reminded his crew of the tactics they had drilled repeatedly. "Their 75mm gun can penetrate our frontal armor at 1,000 yards. We need to use mobility and flanking maneuvers." The radio crackled with the battalion commander's voice. "All units commence advance. Infantry support as briefed. Weapons tight until authorized." Jack keyed his throat mic. "Charlie Company, advance in echelon formation. First platoon left, second platoon center, third platoon right, fourth platoon in reserve. Maintain 50-yard spacing." He tapped Jenkins on the shoulder. "Forward, standard combat speed." The Sherman's 400-horsepower radial engine roared as it accelerated across the desert floor. 16 tanks moved in practice formation, their tan paint blending with the sandy terrain. Each carried the technical modifications Jack had arranged. Extra armor welding on ammunition storage, enhanced fire suppression systems, and the improved transmission cooling that would prove vital in the desert heat. The advance proceeded smoothly for the first 3 miles. No contact with enemy forces. The accompanying infantry moved in their wake, using the tanks as mobile cover. Jack maintained constant communication with his platoon leaders, adjusting the formation to account for terrain features and maintaining optimal spacing to avoid presenting a concentrated target for enemy artillery. The first indication of enemy presence came from Lieutenant Parker in 1st Platoon. "Contact front. Enemy infantry with anti-tank weapons at bearing 340, range approximately 800 yards. Jack raised his binoculars, identifying the German positions among a cluster of low hills ahead. He could see the distinctive shape of PaK-38 anti-tank guns being hurriedly prepared for firing. "All platoons, engage enemy anti-tank positions. Machine guns and main gun HE rounds. Suppress while infantry advances." The Shermans opened fire, their combined firepower impressive even against prepared positions. The 75mm high-explosive rounds impacted among the German gun emplacements, while the coaxial and bow machine guns swept the area with suppressive fire. The Germans returned fire, but their shots fell short or wide as the American tanks continued to move, presenting difficult targets. The infantry used the suppressive fire to advance in bounds, closing the distance to the enemy positions. Jack felt a surge of satisfaction as the plan unfolded successfully. The combined arms approach was working exactly as designed. Then the situation changed dramatically. "Panzer, 3 o'clock, Martinez called out, spotting the distinctive silhouette of a German tank emerging from behind a ridge. Jack swiveled to look. Not one Panzer, but 3. Panzer IVs with the long-barreled 75 mm gun that could penetrate a Sherman at combat ranges. First and second platoons continue supporting infantry, Jack ordered. Third platoon with me, engage enemy armor. He directed Jenkins to turn their tank toward the threat, positioning to engage from an angle that would present their strongest armor to the enemy while allowing their gun to bear. Target identified, Collins reported calmly from the gunner's position. Panzer IV at bearing 090, range 900 yards. APCBC loaded, Wilson confirmed, having loaded an armor-piercing, ballistic capped round. Fire when ready, Jack ordered. Collins took a breath, made a final adjustment, and squeezed the trigger. The Sherman shuddered as its 75mm gun roared. Through his binoculars, Jack saw the round strike the Panzer's turret, deflecting without penetrating. Reload, Jack ordered. Adjust aim for turret ring junction. Wilson slammed another round into the breech with practiced efficiency. On target, Collins reported. Fire! The second shot found its mark. The round penetrated at the vulnerable junction where the turret met the hull. The Panzer didn't explode dramatically as in the training films, but smoke began pouring from its hatches as the crew abandoned the disabled vehicle. Target destroyed, Jack confirmed. Shift to next target. But the Germans were well trained. The remaining Panzers were already maneuvering, seeking hull-down positions that would expose only their turrets while allowing their guns to bear on the American tanks. The radio crackled with urgent reports from 3rd Platoon. This is 3-1. We're taking fire from the ridge line. 3-3 is hit. Jack swiveled to see one of his Shermans trailing smoke, though it continued to move and fight. All 3rd Platoon vectors utilize terrain for cover, engage from hull-down positions when possible. Jack ordered, implementing the tactics they had practiced extensively. The battle devolved into a deadly chess match. The Sherman tanks had better mobility and turret traverse speed, allowing them to reposition quickly. The German Panzers had slightly better armor and gun performance at range, but their slower turret rotation made them vulnerable to flanking maneuvers. Jack directed his forces with the calm precision that had become his hallmark during training. When a German tank exposed its flank while repositioning, he called the shot immediately. When one of his tanks took a hit to its track, he ordered covering fire while a recovery vehicle moved forward. After 20 minutes of intense exchange, the German forces began withdrawing. 2 Panzer IVs lay burning on the battlefield. A third had been immobilized but continued to fire until its ammunition was exhausted and the crew abandoned it. Charlie Company had lost 1 Sherman completely, a catastrophic hit that had ignited its ammunition, though 4 of the 5 crew members had escaped. 3 more tanks were damaged but repairable. As the infantry secured the crossroads, Jack ordered his company into defensive positions, covering likely avenues of counterattack. He dismounted to assess the situation personally, moving from tank to check on his crews and evaluate damage. The wounded were evacuated to field hospitals. Recovery vehicles began retrieving the damaged tanks. Ammunition and fuel were redistributed to ensure all operational tanks were ready for potential counterattack. Jack found Lieutenant Parker supervising repairs to a damaged track on his platoon's lead tank. "How are your men holding up?" Jack asked. Parker wiped sweat and grime from his face. "Good, sir. Johnson's got a minor shrapnel wound, but he refused evacuation, says he can still load." Jack nodded approvingly. "That's the spirit we need, but make sure he gets proper treatment once we're secure." "Sir," Parker hesitated, "the modifications you arranged, they made a difference." Davis's tank took a direct hit to the ammo storage area. Old configuration would have gone up immediately. The additional armor and fire suppression gave them time to bail out. All 5 made it. Jack felt a profound sense of validation. The technical improvements he and Kate had developed had already saved lives in their first engagement. "Documented in your after-action report," Jack instructed. "Every piece of evidence helps get these modifications standardized." As evening approached, Jack gathered his officers for a debrief. They met behind his command tank, using the vehicle for shade from the still brutal sun. "Overall assessment, successful engagement," Jack began. "Mission objectives achieved with acceptable losses. But there are lessons to learn." He outlined the tactical adjustments needed based on their first combat experience. The German tanks had proven more mechanically reliable than intelligence had suggested. Their anti-tank guns were well concealed and positioned for interlocking fields of fire. The coordination between German armor and infantry was impressive. "We adapt and improve," Jack concluded. Maintenance crews worked through the night to have all possible tanks operational by dawn. Ammunition resupply is en route. Intelligence reports possible counterattack at first light. The officers dispersed to implement his orders, leaving Jack alone with his thoughts. He opened his father's journal, which he carried in his battle jacket, turning to an entry written after Thomas Harrington's first tank engagement in 1918. The machines fight, but men win or lose. A tank is only as good as its crew's training, their coordination, and their will to survive and triumph. Today I learned that no plan survives contact with the enemy, but principles endure if they're sound. The wisdom resonated across generations. The technology had evolved dramatically since his father's war, but the fundamental truths remained unchanged. Jack added his own entry to the journal, documenting the lessons of his first armored engagement. Later that night, as maintenance crews worked on the tanks and sentries maintained vigilant watch, Jack wrote 2 letters by flashlight. The first was to Kate, detailing the performance of their modifications in combat conditions. The extra armor on ammunition storage had demonstrably saved lives. The enhanced fire suppression system had prevented a catastrophic fire in one tank. The transmission cooling had maintained optimal operating temperatures despite the extreme desert conditions. The second letter went to the scattered brotherhood. Jack knew they would want details of how the Sherman performed in its first major combat test under his command. The fundamental design is sound, he wrote, but there are improvements needed based on battlefield experience. Eddie, your ballistic calculations were accurate. The gun performs exactly as predicted, with the limitations we identified. Doc, your crew ergonomic modifications made a significant difference in crew efficiency under combat stress. Bull, your training protocols proved their worth. The crews executed exactly as practiced. Jack sealed the letters, knowing it might be weeks before they reached their destinations. But maintaining these connections was vital to the continued evolution of both the tanks and the tactics that would eventually win the war. As he prepared to catch a few hours of sleep before dawn, Jack checked his sidearm and made a final circuit of the company's positions. The men were tense but confident after their successful first engagement. They had faced the enemy and prevailed. The machines they had trained on had proven themselves in combat. Jack ran his hand along the scarred armor of his command tank. A German round had struck the turret, gouging the steel but failing to penetrate. The machine had protected its crew as designed. Thomas Harrington would have approved. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight, the son of a tank commander from the Great War could take pride in following his father's tracks across a different battlefield in a different war, but with the same fundamental mission, to protect the men who served under his command. The Steel Brotherhood continued its work, separated by thousands of miles but united in purpose. The tanks they had designed together were now proving themselves in combat, their strengths confirmed and their weaknesses identified for future improvement. The forge of war was tempering both men and machines, strengthening them through trial by fire. And Jack Harrington, carrying his father's legacy forward, was at the center of this transformation, leading from the commander's hatch of a tank that represented the culmination of American engineering and the beginning of American armored dominance on the battlefield. The watch that Kate safeguarded continued its perfect timekeeping, counting the hours until design and designer would be reunited to incorporate the lessons of combat into the next generation of armored vehicles that would carry American forces to victory across Africa, Europe, and beyond. The Sicilian sun bore down mercilessly as Major Jack Harrington stood in the commander's hatch of his modified Sherman tank, scanning the mountainous terrain ahead through binoculars. Despite the heat, a chill ran through him. Somewhere in those rocky hills, German Tiger tanks waited. 6 months had passed since Charlie Company's baptism by fire in North Africa. 6 months of increasingly difficult combat as Allied forces pushed the Germans and Italians back across Libya and Tunisia. What had begun as a company command for Jack had evolved into something far more specialized. The success of his modified Shermans in the Desert Campaign had caught the attention of high command. Jack's detailed combat reports, combined with the technical analyses Kate forwarded from Aberdeen, had demonstrated the value of specialized anti-tank units equipped with enhanced vehicles. Now Jack commanded what the men called Knighthunters, a specialized company equipped with the most advanced Sherman variants available, dedicated specifically to engaging and neutralizing German heavy tanks. "Movement at 2 o'clock, ridge line," called Sergeant Collins from the gunner's position. Jack focused his binoculars, the distinctive boxy silhouette of a tiger. I was just visible against the rocky backdrop, its long 88mm guns searching for targets. At 54 tons with frontal armor 100mm thick, the Tiger was more than a match for standard Shermans. Even Jack's modified tanks would struggle in a head-on engagement. Range? Jack asked without lowering the binoculars. Approximately 1,800 yards, sir, Collins responded, his voice steady despite the tension of spotting the most feared tank in the European theater. Too far for an effective shot with even their improved 76mm high-velocity guns. The Tiger, however, could hit them from that distance with its deadly 88mm. Jack dropped down into the turret. Radio all elements. Tiger spotted at grid reference Baker 7. Hold positions behind cover. Wait for my command. Lieutenant Parker acknowledged from his tank position 50 yards to the left. The rest of the company responded in sequence. Sir, should we call in air support? Asked Private Jenkins, the driver who had been with Jack since North Africa. Jack considered this. Air support was increasingly available as Allied air forces gained dominance over the skies of Europe. But the mountainous terrain made accurate strikes difficult, and the Tigers were masters of camouflage. Not yet. I want to see if we can draw them out of the hills first. Jack turned to his radio operator. Contact battalion, request artillery fire mission on map grid Baker 7, smoke rounds only. Within minutes, artillery shells began landing on the ridgeline, creating a dense smoke screen that would temporarily blind the German tanks. Jack had learned that Tigers relied heavily on their superior optics and range. Take away their visibility advantage, and the playing field leveled considerably. All elements, advance to phase line Charlie while smoke provides cover. Maintain spacing. Prepare for immediate action when smoke clears. The company of modified Shermans moved forward in practice precision, using the smoke screen to close the distance without exposing themselves to the deadly German 88mm guns. Each tank in Jack's company had received significant upgrades over the standard M4 Sherman. The original 75mm gun had been replaced with the new high-velocity 76mm M1A1, offering better armor penetration. Additional armor plates had been welded to the frontal glacis at precisely calculated angles to maximize deflection. The ammunition storage had been modified with wet stowage, surrounding the shells with a glycerin solution that reduced the chance of catastrophic explosion if penetrated. Most significantly, they had implemented the fuel system redesign Jack and Kate had developed at Aberdeen. Instead of the vulnerable arrangement that placed gasoline tanks directly behind the crew compartment, a system of armored baffles and automatic fire suppression now provided critical seconds for crews to escape if their tank was hit. These modifications came at a cost. Increased weight, reduced speed, and put additional strain on the transmission and suspension. But in the deadly calculus of armored warfare, survivability trumped mobility. As they reached their new positions, the wind began to disperse the smoke. The Tigers would soon have visibility again. All elements, target identified. Prepare for company fire concentration on my command. 16 Sherman tanks, each with its improved 76mm gun, trained on the area where the Tiger had been spotted. When the smoke cleared enough to reveal the German tanks still in position, seemingly unaware of their advance, Jack gave the order. Fire! The sound of 16 high-velocity guns firing in near unison was deafening. Multiple rounds struck the Tiger, and while some bounced off its thick frontal armor, others found vulnerable points. The German tank erupted in flames. But the victory was short-lived. From concealed positions higher in the hills, 3 more Tigers opened fire. Their shells landed with terrifying accuracy among the Sherman formation. Evasive maneuvers! Pattern Delta! Jack ordered, dropping back into his turret as a shell whistled overhead. The company scattered according to their practice drill, each tank moving in a seemingly random pattern designed to confuse enemy gunners. But the Germans were good, too good. Lightning 3 is hit. Crew bailing out. Parker's voice crackled over the radio. Jack watched in horror as the Sherman commanded by Lieutenant Rodriguez erupted in flames. His heart sank as he recognized Eddie climbing out of the commander's hatch, his uniform ablaze. 2 other crew members followed, but there was no sign of the remaining 2. Eddie Rodriguez, not just a lieutenant under his command, but one of the original Steel Brotherhood, the mathematical genius whose ballistic calculations had improved the accuracy of every gun in the company. Lightning 4, provide covering fire for Lightning 3's crew, Jack ordered, fighting to keep his voice steady despite seeing his friend in danger. The nearest Sherman laid down machine gun fire to keep German infantry at bay, while the surviving crew members of Lightning III scrambled toward a nearby drainage ditch. Jack faced a commander's nightmare. His men were exposed in disadvantageous terrain against superior enemy armor. Continuing the advance would mean more casualties. Retreating would cede hard-won ground. All elements, fall back to phase line Baker. Use smoke to cover withdrawal. The order tasted bitter, but Jack knew it was the right call. Lightning II, recover Lightning III survivors if possible. As the company began its strategic withdrawal, Jack's radio crackled with Eddie's voice. Lightning VI, this is Lightning III actual. Johnson and Ramirez didn't make it out. Tank's ammunition cooking off, cannot recover. Jack closed his eyes briefly, absorbing another loss. Understood, Lightning III, get to safety. We'll send medics forward. The company regrouped behind a low ridge line that provided cover from the German positions. Jack dismounted to assess the situation. Eddie was being treated by medics for burns to his arms and face. The sight of his friend's pain fueled a cold anger in Jack's chest. Doc approached, his medical kit in hand. Though officially assigned to the medical corps, Samuel Doc Miller had arranged to be attached to Jack's specialized unit, serving as both medical officer and technical advisor. His expertise in crew ergonomics and wound treatment had proven invaluable in the harsh realities of tank warfare. Eddie will recover, but he's out of action for at least 2 weeks, Doc reported, his once pristine wire-rimmed glasses now scratched and dirty from the rigors of the battlefield. Second-degree burns, possibly some smoke inhalation. Jack nodded grimly. What about the others? Martinez has a broken leg from the jump out of the tank. Williamson is relatively unharmed. Doc's expression darkened. Johnson and Ramirez. The ammunition exploded before they could get out. Jack absorbed this information with the outward stoicism expected of a commander, but inwardly, each loss cut deep, especially when it was one of their test tanks, with crews specially trained to evaluate the new designs. The modifications work, Jack, Eddie spoke up from the stretcher. His voice was hoarse from smoke. The shell penetrated at the turret ring. Design flaw, not your modifications. The regular Sherman would have gone up immediately with all hands lost. Jack knelt beside his friend. Save your strength, Eddie. We'll analyze what happened later. Eddie grabbed Jack's wrist with surprising strength. No, listen, the Tiger was using some new kind of round. Tungsten core, I think. They're adapting to our improvements. This was valuable intelligence. The constant technological chess match between German and American armor design continued to evolve. The Germans were fielding new ammunition specifically designed to counter the improved armor of the modified Shermans. I'll include it in my report, Jack promised. Now let the medics take care of you. As Eddie was evacuated to the field hospital, Jack gathered his officers to plan their next move. The Tigers still controlled the high ground, blocking the advance of their entire battalion. Sir, battalion is requesting situation report, Lieutenant Parker informed him. Jack studied the map, considering options. A frontal assault would be costly. Flanking movements were limited by the terrain. Artillery had proven only marginally effective against the well-armored German tanks. Tell battalion that we encountered 4 Tigers in prepared defensive positions, 1 destroyed, 3 still operational. Request air support to neutralize remaining armor before infantry advances. While waiting for a response, Jack examined the damaged Sherman they had managed to recover. The shell had indeed penetrated at the turret ring, a known vulnerability they had attempted to address with additional armor. But the German tungsten core round had cut through even their enhanced protection. We need a better angle on the frontal armor, Jack muttered, almost to himself, and better crew extraction protocols when hit. Doc nodded in agreement. I've been working on a hatch modification that would allow faster egress. Been meaning to show you the designs. Jack was reminded again why the Steel Brotherhood approach was so effective. Each of them brought different expertise to the problem. Doc's medical knowledge informed his designs for crew protection and evacuation. Eddie's mathematical precision had improved ballistic performance. Bulge's spatial reasoning, though now applied to training back in the States, had enhanced the ergonomic layout of the fighting compartment. Draw it up tonight. We'll implement it immediately on the remaining tanks. Battalion's response came through. Air support approved, ETA 45 minutes. P-47 Thunderbolts armed with 500-pound bombs would attempt to dislodge the Tigers. While they waited, Jack drafted a preliminary report for Aberdeen. Kate needed to know about the new German ammunition immediately so that armor improvements could be accelerated. The airstrike, when it came, was spectacular but ultimately less effective than hoped. The mountainous terrain and the Germans' skill at camouflage limited direct hits. One Tiger was disabled, but two remained operational and simply repositioned to new firing positions. As night fell, the battalion commander ordered them to hold their position and prepare for a coordinated attack at dawn. Infantry would advance under cover of smoke to neutralize German anti-tank positions, while tanks would provide fire support from hull-down positions. In the relative quiet of evening, Jack found a moment to write to Kate. His letters had become increasingly technical, focusing on the performance of their modifications in combat. This one would detail the penetration at the turret ring and the suspected new German ammunition. But tonight he added something more personal. Each loss weighs heavier now that I know exactly how these machines work. What could have been designed better? My father once told me that engineering isn't just about machines, but about the people those machines serve and protect. I understand that now more than ever. Your designs have saved many lives already, but there's more to do. The watch still keeps perfect time, counting the moments until this is all over. He sealed the letter, knowing it would be weeks before it reached her at Aberdeen. In the meantime, they had a battle to win tomorrow. Dawn brought fog rolling through the valleys, providing natural concealment for the planned advance. Jack gathered his tank commanders for final instructions. We'll advance in echelon formation, maintaining cover behind these ridgelines. He indicated positions on the map. Fire only when you have a clear shot at the Tiger's side or rear armor. Wait for the infantry to flush them from their positions. Lieutenant Parker raised a concern. Sir, what if they don't move? The infantry will be exposed to their machine guns. It was a valid point. Jack had been considering this problem all night. We'll use our smoke rounds to create a rolling screen for the infantry, and I've arranged a little surprise. Jack had requested and received several white phosphorus rounds for their 76mm guns. Not standard issue, but effective for creating both smoke and encouraging enemy tanks to relocate. The phosphorus burned at over 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and while it wouldn't penetrate the Tiger's armor, it could force the crew to abandon their position if it entered vision slits or air intakes. Aim white phosphorus at their optics and air intakes. It won't penetrate, but it will blind them and possibly cause engine issues if it's drawn into their air filtration. The attack commenced at 0700 hours. Infantry advanced behind artillery smoke screens, while Jack's tanks provided covering fire from hull-down positions. The white phosphorus rounds proved effective, forcing one Tiger to back away from its position when its optics were obscured and smoke began seeping into the crew compartment. As the German tank exposed its side armor while repositioning, 3 Sherman tanks fired simultaneously. 2 rounds bounced off, but the third penetrated the thinner side armor, disabling the vehicle. The remaining Tiger, recognizing the deteriorating situation, began a fighting withdrawal up the valley. The German crew was skilled, maintaining a covering fire that kept the American tanks at bay during their retreat. Jack watched through his binoculars as the Tiger disappeared around a bend in the road. Victory, but at a cost. The infantry had suffered casualties from German machine gun positions, and they had lost one more Sherman to a hidden anti-tank gun during the advance. By mid-afternoon, the heights were secured, and American forces began moving through the pass. Jack's company regrouped to assess damage and make repairs where possible. The modified Shermans had performed well, but the engagement highlighted continuing vulnerabilities. The turret ring remained a weak point despite additional armor. The high-velocity 76mm guns still struggled against the Tiger's frontal armor at combat ranges, and the new German tungsten core ammunition posed a threat even to their enhanced protection. As mechanics worked on the tanks, Jack found a quiet spot to review the day's events and update his combat journal. Each engagement provided new data on the Sherman's performance, information that would shape future modifications. A messenger interrupted his thoughts. Major Harrington, Colonel Davis requests your presence at Battalion HQ immediately, sir. Jack arrived at the makeshift headquarters to find an unexpected visitor. Lieutenant Colonel William Sherman, now sporting a silver eagle on his collar, was waiting with the battalion commander. Colonel Sherman, Jack saluted. I wasn't aware you were in Italy. Sherman returned the salute with a warm smile. Just arrived yesterday. Been following your unit's progress with great interest. Colonel Davis excused himself to give them privacy, and Sherman's expression grew more serious. Jack, I've been sent by General Patton himself. He's read your combat reports and is particularly interested in your tank modifications. Jack straightened. Sir? The Third Army is preparing for something big. Can't say more here, but Patton wants the best tank minds in the Army for what's coming. Sherman placed a folder on the table. These are your new orders. Your entire testing unit is being transferred. Jack opened the folder. The orders reassigned him and his company to England, effective immediately. England? Sir, we're in the middle of the Italian campaign. Sherman nodded, understanding. I know, but what's being planned is bigger than Italy, much bigger. The implication was clear. Invasion of France. The opening of a true second front against Nazi Germany. The entire Steel Brotherhood? Jack asked. All of you, Sherman confirmed, including Dr. Sullivan. She's being transferred from Aberdeen to the technical support team in England. Jack's heart jumped at this news. He hadn't seen Kate in over a year. Their relationship maintained solely through letters and shared technical work. When do we leave? Transport ships are waiting in Naples. You have 48 hours to get your unit there. Sherman smiled slightly, recognizing the personal significance behind Jack's professional demeanor. She arrived in England last week, by the way, already making waves with her insistence on more armor for the tank destroyers. Jack couldn't help but smile. That sounded like Kate. There's something else, Sherman added, his expression sobering. We lost Bill Thompson 2 weeks ago. Jack felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Bull? How? Training accident at Fort Knox. One of the new tank designs had a catastrophic turret failure during testing. He was inside evaluating crew positions. Jack closed his eyes briefly. Bull had been the physical cornerstone of the Steel Brotherhood, the seemingly indestructible farm boy from Kansas. To lose him in a training accident rather than combat seemed particularly cruel. He saved 3 other men, Sherman continued quietly, held up the collapsed turret long enough for them to escape. Pure Bull. Jack nodded, unable to speak for a moment. The image of Bull's massive strength being used one final time to save others was painfully fitting. His last report included recommendations for your turret design, Sherman added. They've already been implemented in the newest production models. His legacy continues through your work. This was the 5th twist fate had thrown at the Steel Brotherhood. Bull's death was a profound loss, not just personally, but professionally. His intuitive understanding of spatial relationships had informed many of their designs, particularly the crew ergonomics that saved precious seconds during emergency evacuation. 2 days later, Jack stood on the deck of a transport ship, watching the Italian coastline recede into the distance. His unit, minus the wounded including Eddie, was being transported to England to prepare for what everyone now understood would be the invasion of Normandy. Doc joined him at the rail, his expression contemplative. Strange journey we're on, from design engineers to combat officers and back to technical work. Jack nodded. Not exactly back. We're bringing something more valuable now. Combat experience, Doc agreed, theory tested in fire. And written in blood, Jack added solemnly, thinking of Bull and all the others lost along the way. The voyage to England took 10 days, navigating carefully to avoid German U-boats that still prowled the Atlantic despite diminishing effectiveness. Jack used the time to compile comprehensive reports on their combat experience in North Africa and Italy, documenting every weakness they'd identified and every successful modification. When they arrived in Liverpool, transportation was waiting to take them to a secure testing facility in the English countryside. The level of security surrounding their movement suggested the critical nature of their new assignment. The testing ground was massive, far larger than what they'd had access to in North Africa. Dozens of tanks of various models were arranged in neat rows. Sherman variants, Richard Sherman variants, British Cromwells and Churchills, and captured German Panthers and Tigers for comparison testing. Jack's heart raced when he spotted a slender figure in army khakis examining a tank transmission laid out on a workbench. Her auburn hair was shorter now, cut in a practical style that still managed to frame her face beautifully. Dr. Sullivan seems very focused on that transmission, Doc observed with a knowing smile. Perhaps you should see if she needs assistance, Major. Jack straightened his uniform and walked across the compound. Kate was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice his approach until he was just a few feet away. That drive shaft looks like it could use a redesigned bearing assembly, he said softly. Kate froze, then slowly turned around. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, cataloging the changes that time and war had wrought. New lines around her eyes, a thin scar on his temple from a close call in Sicily, both of them leaner, more weathered. Your assessment is correct, Major Harrington, she finally replied, her professional tone belied by the emotion in her eyes. The current design is inadequate for extended operations in muddy conditions. Jack smiled. I've seen that failure in the field. We had to replace 3 of them after a single day in the Italian mountains during rainfall. The professional exchange was a comfortable bridge between them, allowing them to ease back into their connection through their shared technical passion. "I've received all your field reports," Kate said, reaching into her pocket, "and kept this safe as promised." She held out his father's pocket watch. Jack took it reverently, feeling the familiar weight in his palm. "Still keeping perfect time?" he asked, his voice low. "Perfect enough," she replied with a small smile. "Though I did have the crystal replaced. Thought your father would understand the need for clear visibility, even if he preferred the character of the crack." Jack opened the watch, noticing the new crystal, but also that she had left the slightly bent, minute hand untouched. The perfect balance of respect for tradition and practical improvement that characterized Kate's approach to engineering. The moment was interrupted by a senior officer calling from across the compound. "Dr. Sullivan? Major Harrington, General Montgomery has arrived for the briefing." Reality intruded. They were here for the war effort, not their personal reunion. That would have to wait. "We should go," Kate said, reluctance evident in her voice. Jack nodded, pocketing the watch. "We'll continue this discussion later. I have several other mechanical observations from the field that might interest you." Her eyes sparkled with understanding of his deeper meaning. "I look forward to a comprehensive debriefing, Major." The briefing room was filled with senior officers from both American and British forces. General Bernard Montgomery himself presided, along with several other generals Jack recognized from news photographs. "Gentlemen and Dr. Sullivan," Montgomery began in his clipped British accent, "what we discuss here today is classified at the highest level. Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Normandy, is scheduled for early June, weather permitting." A map was unveiled showing the Normandy coastline divided into sectors: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword Beaches. "American forces will land at Utah and Omaha," Montgomery continued. "British and Canadian at Gold, Juneau, and Sword. Armor support will be critical to the success of the operation, particularly in the hours immediately following the initial landings." Jack studied the map intently, noting the terrain behind the beaches. Hedgerows, narrow roads, soft sand, all challenging for tank operations. "We anticipate strong German armor counterattacks within 24 to 48 hours of the landings," Montgomery explained. "Our tanks must be prepared to both support the infantry landings and counter German armor effectively." Here was the reason for their transfer. The Steel Brotherhood's experience fighting German tanks and their technical expertise would be crucial for preparing the invasion forces. "Major Harrington," Montgomery addressed him directly, "your unit's experience against Tigers and Panthers in Italy has been particularly noted. You will work with our technical teams to implement your modifications across as many units as possible before the invasion." "Yes, sir," Jack acknowledged, mind already racing with priorities. Armor improvements, ammunition storage, crew extraction protocols. There was so much to do and likely little time. "Dr. Sullivan will head the technical implementation team," Montgomery continued. "Major Harrington, your combat veterans will train tank crews in the tactics you have developed for engaging German armor." The briefing continued for another hour, covering logistics, timetables, and security protocols. When it concluded, Jack and Kate were assigned adjoining offices in the technical building, a convenience that brought knowing looks from Doc. That evening, Jack and Kate finally had their personal reunion over dinner in the officers' mess. They found a quiet corner where they could speak relatively privately. "Your armor modifications saved my life twice in Italy," Jack told her, rolling up his sleeve to reveal a jagged scar on his forearm. "Tank took a direct hit from a Panzer IV. Old model would have brewed up immediately. Yours gave us time to get out with only minor injuries." Kate touched the scar gently, her technical interest momentarily overshadowed by personal concern. "The turret ring vulnerability. Eddie spotted it. That's what got him wounded." Jack explained the incident in the suspected new German ammunition. Kate nodded thoughtfully. "We've already started working on a solution. Double-layered armor with a compression space between layers. Like a naval ship's torpedo protection but miniaturized," Jack observed, impressed. "Exactly. The first layer deforms the projectile, the gap allows it to tumble and lose energy, then the second layer stops it." Their technical discussion continued through dinner, both of them finding comfort in the familiar exchange of ideas. It was how they had always operated, channeling their deeper feelings into the work that bound them together. "The Sherman is still fundamentally outmatched by the Tiger and Panther in terms of armor and firepower," Kate said, lowering her voice to avoid being overheard. "We can improve it incrementally, but there are physical limits to what can be done with the basic chassis. Jack nodded grimly. I know. The 76mm gun is better than the 75, but still struggles against frontal armor at combat ranges. And every pound of additional armor we add affects mobility and transmission reliability. There's a new design in development, the T-26, eventually to be designated the M26 Pershing, heavier armor, lower profile, 90mm gun. Kate's eyes lit up with technical enthusiasm. But it won't be ready in time for the invasion. So we work with what we have, Jack concluded. Make the Sherman as effective as possible through modifications and tactical training. Kate reached across the table and briefly touched his hand. What you've done already has saved hundreds of lives, Jack. Don't forget that. It wasn't until they walked outside into the cool English evening that they allowed themselves to address more personal matters. I missed you, Jack said simply as they strolled through the compound. I missed our collaboration, Kate replied with professional caution, aware of passing personnel. That too, Jack smiled. But mostly I missed you. Kate's professional facade softened. It's been a long year. Too long, Jack agreed. They found themselves beside a Sherman tank, one of the new models incorporating their collaborative designs. Jack ran his hand along the sloped armor, a tangible representation of their partnership. We make a good team, he observed, in more ways than one. Kate glanced around to ensure they weren't being observed, then quickly squeezed his hand. The best. The moment was brief but meaningful, a promise of more to come when circumstances allowed. For now, they had work to do. Critical work that would help determine the success or failure of the most significant Allied operation of the war. Chapter 6. The Longest Day. Over the following weeks, Jack and Kate worked tirelessly with their teams. The Steel Brotherhood, minus the fallen bull and the recovering Eddie, implemented a comprehensive training program for tank crews preparing for the invasion. Doc developed improved medical protocols for tank crews, focusing on treating burn injuries and rapid evacuation procedures. Jack worked with gunners on techniques for engaging German armor, emphasizing the vulnerabilities they had identified in combat. Kate's technical team implemented modifications across hundreds of tanks, prioritizing improvements that could be completed quickly with available materials. Not every tank could receive every enhancement, but each improvement increased survival chances. One evening, as they worked late in Kate's office reviewing technical drawings, Jack received an unexpected visitor. General William Sherman entered without ceremony, looking grim. Jack, we have a situation, Sherman said without preamble. Intelligence reports indicate a German Tiger tank unit has been moved to the Normandy area, commanded by Colonel Otto Kessler. Jack straightened, the name immediately registering. The Black Knight. Kate looked between them questioningly. Colonel Kessler is one of Germany's most decorated tank commanders, Jack explained. His unit destroyed 27 Allied tanks in a single day during the fighting in Sicily. We never managed to engage him directly. They're calling his unit the Black Knights now, Sherman added. 5 Tiger tanks with exceptional crews. They've been retrofitted with the latest armor and ammunition improvements. Jack absorbed this sobering news. Where exactly are they positioned? Sherman unfolded a map on Kate's desk. Intelligence puts them here, about 7 miles inland from Omaha Beach, directly in the path of our planned breakout route. The implications were clear. American armor advancing from Omaha would run straight into Kessler's Tigers within hours of the invasion. The potential for catastrophic losses was high, especially given the limitations of even their modified Shermans against Tigers in frontal engagement. We need special teams, Jack said decisively. Our best crews and our best tanks, specifically tasked with hunting Kessler's unit before they can decimate our regular armor. Sherman nodded. That's why I'm here. I want you to form that team personally. Select 5 crews from your training cadre, the best of the best. Tank hunters, Jack mused, the concept forming rapidly in his mind. We'll need the very latest modifications and special ammunition. Kate was already making notes. I've been working on a new armor-piercing round, tungsten core with an innovative ballistic cap. Limited production, but I can get you enough for 5 tanks. Sherman looked between them with approval. This is exactly why the Steel Brotherhood concept works. Get me your personnel and equipment requirements by 0800 tomorrow. You'll have whatever you need. After Sherman departed, Jack and Kate worked through the night, designing what would effectively be a new type of tank unit, not meant for infantry support or general breakthrough operations, but specifically engineered to hunt and kill German Tigers. We'll need to strip weight to increase speed and maneuverability, Jack explained, as he sketched modifications. Remove the hull machine gun, lighten the rear armor since we'll be engaging frontally. Kate nodded, making calculations. That would allow for thicker frontal armor without increasing overall weight. And with the new ammunition, you should be able to penetrate a Tiger's frontal armor at ranges up to 1,000 yards. The design evolved as they worked, incorporating everything they had learned from combat experience and technical testing. The result would be the most specialized Sherman variant yet, a purpose-built Tiger Hunter. We'll need a name for these tanks, Jack mused as they finalized the design. Knighthunter's, Kate suggested, since they'll be hunting Kessler's Black Knights. Jack smiled. Perfect. By morning, they had a comprehensive plan. 5 Sherman tanks with extensive modifications and elite crews designated as Knighthunters. Jack would command personally, with Doc serving as his gunner. You're putting yourself in the line of fire again, Kate observed as they prepared to present their plan to Sherman. You could oversee this from a command position. Jack shook his head. I can't ask these men to face Kessler if I'm not willing to do it myself. Kate understood. It was the same sense of responsibility that had driven Jack since she'd first met him at Aberdeen. The son of Thomas Harrington would never remain safely behind while others faced danger using his designs. Then make sure your modifications work perfectly, she said with forced lightness. I expect that pocket watch back in working condition. Jack smiled, recognizing her concern beneath the professional banter. Count on it. The sixth twist of fate was about to unfold. One that would test Jack and the Steel Brotherhood in ways they couldn't imagine. June 6, 1944, D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in military history, was underway as dawn broke over the Normandy coastline. From the deck of the LST landing ship tank, carrying his Knighthunter unit toward Omaha Beach, Major Jack Harrington watched the awesome spectacle unfold. Thousands of ships of every description filled the English Channel. The thunderous barrage of naval guns created a continuous roar as they hammered German defensive positions. Landing craft packed with infantry headed toward the beaches in endless waves. And it was failing. The radio reports from the first waves painted a grim picture, particularly at Omaha Beach. German defenses were much stronger than anticipated. Infantry was pinned down on the beach, unable to advance. The first tanks to land were being picked off by well-positioned anti-tank guns before they could provide effective support. Orders from command, the ship's captain informed Jack. All armor landings at Omaha temporarily suspended until infantry can establish a beachhead. Jack's unit would have to wait, listening to the desperate radio calls from the beach while sitting helplessly offshore. It was agonizing. Sir, we could still make a difference, Lieutenant Parker argued. Even 5 tanks could help break the stalemate. Jack shared his frustration, but understood the tactical reality. Landing now would just give the Germans 5 more targets. We need to wait until there's a viable exit from the beach for armor. The wait stretched for hours. Reports continued to come in, each more desperate than the last. American forces were taking heavy casualties, but gradually securing footholds at the base of the bluffs overlooking the beach. Finally, at mid-afternoon, their orders came. Engineers had cleared paths through the beach obstacles. The Knighthunters would land with the next wave of armor. Jack gathered his crews for final instructions before they boarded their tanks in the ship's hold. Remember your training. These are the most heavily modified Shermans in the invasion force, incorporating everything we learned fighting the Germans in Italy. They're faster, better protected frontally, and carry specialized ammunition. He looked at each man in turn, seeing the determination in their eyes. Our mission hasn't changed. Once we break out from the beach, we hunt down Kessler's Tigers before they can decimate our regular armor units. Doc has the intelligence photos. Study them. Learn to recognize their tanks by the distinctive paint schemes. The men nodded. They had been drilling for this mission for weeks. One last thing, Jack added. Every one of you volunteered for this mission knowing the risks. Whatever happens today, you've already honored the Steel Brotherhood with your courage. The landing ramp of the LST lowered with a mechanical groan, revealing the chaos of Omaha Beach. Jack's tank was first in line to disembark. Through his periscope, he could see the carnage of the earlier landing attempts. Disabled vehicles, bodies in the water, the beach itself pockmarked with shell craters. Driver, advance, Jack ordered. Follow the marked path exactly. Engineers have cleared mines, but only on the designated route. The Sherman lurched forward, leaving the relative safety of the ship for the contested beach. Water splashed over the hull as they navigated through the shallows. Jack held his breath until they reached dry land, aware that a deep hole could drown the tank and crew instantly. Once on the beach, they accelerated toward the seawall, presenting as brief a target as possible to German gunners on the bluffs. Shells landed around them, but none scored a direct hit. The 4 other tanks of the Knighthunter unit followed in tight formation. The technical details of their modified Shermans proved crucial in these first moments. The lighter overall weight improved their speed across the soft sand. The enhanced engine cooling systems prevented overheating despite the strain. The relocated ammunition storage reduced the risk from incoming fire. At the seawall, engineers had cleared a path up the bluff. Jack's tank ground its way up the steep incline, treads churning through the sandy soil. At the top, they emerged into a landscape of hedgerows and narrow lanes. The terrain that intelligence had warned would be challenging for tank operations. "All Knight-Hunters, form up on my position," Jack ordered via radio. "Wedge formation, we advance along Route Green as planned." Route Green was one of the predetermined paths inland from Omaha Beach, designated for armor units to support the infantry advance. According to intelligence, it would also take them directly toward the suspected position of Kessler's Tiger unit. The 5 Shermans moved cautiously through the hedgerow country. The tall, dense vegetation created natural barriers between fields, limiting visibility and channeling their movement along narrow lanes. Perfect ambush territory. "This is perfect ambush territory," Doc observed from the gunner's position, echoing Jack's thoughts. "Germans could be waiting around any corner." Jack nodded grimly. "Stay alert. Rotate turret to cover angles as we advance." They had traveled less than 2 miles inland when they encountered their first resistance. A German Panzer IV emerged from concealment behind a farmhouse, its gun already trained on the lead American tank. "Target front," Doc called, already rotating their turret. "Fire when ready," Jack ordered. Doc fired before the German tank could, the improved 76mm gun of the Sherman sending its specialized round directly into the Panzer's front plate. The German tank shuddered as the round penetrated, then erupted in flames as its ammunition cooked off. "Good shot," Jack acknowledged, but there was no time for celebration. "All units, spread out. Where there's one, there will be more." His instinct proved correct. 2 more Panzer IVs appeared, engaging from different angles. The Knight-Hunters responded with disciplined fire, their enhanced Shermans proving more than a match for the older German tanks. Within minutes, all 3 Panzers were burning wrecks, and the American unit had suffered only minor damage to 1 tank. But these weren't Kessler's Tigers, just a regular Panzer unit. "These aren't Kessler's Tigers," Jack observed, "just a regular Panzer unit. Continue advance." As they pushed further inland, they began encountering retreating German infantry and received reports of American paratroopers who had dropped during the night, linking up with the beach landing forces. The invasion, despite its difficult start, was proceeding. Late in the afternoon, they reached a small village that intelligence had identified as a German strongpoint. It appeared abandoned, but Jack was suspicious. "Too quiet," he muttered. "Hold position. Parker, take your tank forward to reconnoiter." Parker's Sherman advanced cautiously into the village square. Nothing happened. No resistance, no civilians, just an eerie silence. "Looks clear, sir," Parker reported. No sign of... His transmission cut off as a massive explosion engulfed his tank. Not artillery or an anti-tank round, but something far more powerful. "Ambush!" Jack shouted. "All units, reverse! Get out of the kill zone!" Too late. From concealed positions around the village, 3 Tiger tanks opened fire simultaneously. Their shots struck with deadly accuracy, penetrating even the enhanced frontal armor of the specialized Shermans. In seconds, 2 more Knight-Hunters were hit, their crews scrambling to escape the burning vehicles. Jack ordered smoke deployed to cover their withdrawal, but it was a fighting retreat. The Tigers pursued methodically, using their superior range to pick off targets while staying beyond effective return fire range. "It's them," Doc confirmed, examining one Tiger through the gunner's scope. Black Knight markings on the turret. Kessler's unit. The hunters had become the hunted. Jack's mind raced, processing options. They were down to 2 operational tanks against 3 Tigers. Frontal engagement would be suicide. They needed to change the dynamics of the battle. "Henderson," Jack called to his remaining tank commander. "We split up. Circle around through those orchards to the south. I'll draw their fire to the north. Meet behind the village church in 15 minutes. "Copy that, sir. Good hunting." The 2 Shermans separated, using smoke in the hedgerows for concealment. Jack directed his driver through a series of maneuvers designed to make the Germans think they were retreating in disarray. In reality, he was executing a flanking movement that would bring him around behind the Tiger commanded by Kessler himself, identifiable by its distinctive iron cross markings and kill tallies painted on the gun barrel. The maneuver required perfect timing and navigation through unfamiliar terrain. Jack's driver, Private Jenkins, performed admirably, threading the massive Sherman through gaps in hedgerows barely wide enough to accommodate it. "Target acquired," Doc announced as they emerged from concealment. "Tiger tank, range 400 yards, presenting side armor." It was Kessler's command tank, positioned behind the others, directing their movements. The German commander had not anticipated this flanking maneuver and had left his own vehicle vulnerable. "AP round loaded," Corporal Wilson confirmed, having loaded one of the special tungsten core rounds Kate had provided specifically for engaging Tigers. "Fire," Jack ordered calmly. The Sherman's gun roared. The round struck the Tiger perfectly on its thinner side armor, penetrating with a shower of sparks. The German tank shuddered but did not immediately catch fire. "Again," Jack ordered. "Same spot." A second round followed the first, striking within inches of the initial impact. This time, the Tiger's ammunition storage detonated, blowing the heavy turret completely off the hull in a spectacular explosion. Colonel Otto Kessler, the Black Knight who had terrorized Allied armor for 2 years, was eliminated. But the victory was short-lived. The remaining 2 Tigers, alerted to the threat, swung their turrets around with alarming speed. Jack's tank was now exposed, caught in the open between hedgerows. "Reverse, get back to cover," Jack ordered. Jenkins threw the Sherman into reverse, but they wouldn't reach the hedgerow before the Tigers fired. Jack braced for impact. Instead, one of the Tigers suddenly erupted in flames as a round struck it from an unexpected angle. Henderson had completed his flanking maneuver from the south, catching the Germans in a crossfire. The last Tiger, recognizing the collapsing situation, began a fighting withdrawal, firing as it retreated toward the village. "Pursue?" Doc asked, already rotating the turret to track the fleeing Tiger. Jack considered the situation. They had eliminated Kessler and 2 of his 5 Tigers. Intelligence would want to know where the remaining 2 were positioned, but his unit was down to 2 operational tanks, and they had wounded crew members who needed evacuation. "Negative. We secure our wounded and report our position. The remaining Tigers will be tracked by air reconnaissance." As they regrouped to assist the crews of the damaged tanks, Jack surveyed the battlefield. The price had been high, but they had accomplished their primary mission. Kessler, the most dangerous German tank commander in the theater, was eliminated. His unit was reduced from 5 Tigers to 2 at most. The Allied armor advancing from Omaha Beach would face significantly reduced resistance. The 7th twist had unfolded. The Knighthunter's had succeeded against overwhelming odds, but at a terrible cost. 3 of 5 tanks destroyed, multiple crew members wounded or killed. A reminder of the brutal calculus of armored warfare, where victory was measured in both objectives achieved and lives preserved. Later that evening, as medics treated the wounded and recovery vehicles arrived to retrieve the damaged tanks, Jack found a quiet moment to draft his report. The Knighthunter concept had proven both effective and costly. 3 tanks lost to destroy 3 Tigers was an acceptable exchange ratio by any tactical analysis, but Jack felt each loss personally. Lieutenant Parker had survived but was severely burned. He would be evacuated to England. 6 other crew members were wounded to varying degrees. 2 had not survived. As Jack completed his report, a messenger approached. "Major Harrington, urgent communication for you, sir." Jack opened the message. It was brief and direct, encrypted but easily understood with his code key. "Special tank unit required Utah Beach sector stop. German armor counterattack developing stop. Proceed with remaining assets immediately stop." There would be no rest. The remaining 2 Knighthunters were needed at Utah Beach, 20 miles away, where a German armored division was reportedly massing for a counterattack. Jack gathered his remaining crews, explaining the new mission. Despite their exhaustion and the losses they had already suffered, there was no hesitation. "We're tank hunters," Henderson said simply. "It's what we do." They departed within the hour, leaving their wounded in the care of field hospitals and pushing their modified Shermans to maximum speed along roads clogged with advancing Allied forces and retreating civilians. Throughout the night they traveled, navigating by map and compass through unfamiliar territory. Dawn found them approaching the Utah Beach sector, where American forces had established a more secure beachhead than at Omaha. The situation was immediately apparent. German panzer units were probing American lines, testing for weaknesses before committing to a full counterattack. Regular Sherman units were engaging but struggling against the superior German tanks. Jack reported to the sector commander, a harried colonel coordinating the defense. Major Harrington, thank God. We've got Panthers and Tigers forming up behind that ridgeline. Intelligence says at least a company strength, maybe 15 tanks. They'll roll right over us if they attack in force. Jack surveyed the tactical situation. 2 modified Shermans against 15 German heavy tanks were impossible odds, even with their specialized equipment and experienced crews. We need air support, Jack stated flatly. P-47s with rockets. The colonel nodded grimly. Already requested, weather's making it difficult. Low cloud ceiling. Jack formulated a plan based on their limited resources. We'll act as forward observers. Get us elevated positions overlooking the likely attack routes. We'll engage targets of opportunity and direct artillery fire onto their assembly areas. With positions assigned, Jack's 2 remaining tanks moved to strategic vantage points. From his elevated position, Jack could see the German armor assembling for what would clearly be a major counterattack aimed at pushing the Americans back into the sea. Doc, count targets, Jack ordered, studying the enemy through his binoculars. 5, 8, 12, at least 15 heavy tanks, Doc confirmed, plus supporting vehicles. They're forming up in classic attack formation. Jack relayed the coordinates to Artillery Command, requesting immediate fire mission. The response was prompt. American artillery began raining shells onto the German assembly area, disrupting their formation but not deterring the attack. The Panthers and Tigers began their advance, weathering the artillery barrage with minimal losses thanks to their heavy armor. Jack's 2 Shermans were now in the precarious position of being the only American tanks with the firepower to effectively engage the German heavies. Henderson, engage from your position. Target lead vehicles. I'll take the command tanks in the rear. Both Shermans opened fire, their specialized rounds proving effective at the medium ranges now separating the forces. 2 German tanks were disabled in the opening exchange, but the others continued their advance, zeroing in on the American firing positions. Jack's tank took a glancing hit that failed to penetrate but cracked their vision blocks, limiting visibility. Henderson reported his tank was still operational, but had lost its radio after a near miss. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The German advance continued despite their accurate fire. American infantry anti-tank teams engaged with bazookas, but had minimal effect on the well-armored German vehicles. Just as the situation appeared hopeless, the distinctive sound of aircraft engines broke through the din of battle. P-47 Thunderbolts, the tank-killing specialists of the Army Air Forces, arrived despite the marginal weather. Direct airstrike onto the main German formation, Jack ordered his radio operator. Tell them we're marking targets with smoke rounds. The Knighthunter's fired smoke shells to identify the primary German concentrations, and the P-47s responded with devastating rocket strikes. German tanks, virtually impervious to frontal attacks from ground forces, proved vulnerable to air attack from above. Within minutes, the German counterattack was in disarray. Burning tanks littered the battlefield as the surviving vehicles retreated toward their starting positions. The 8th twist had unfolded. Against impossible odds, the 2 remaining Knighthunters had held the line until air support could arrive. The combination of specialized ground vehicles and air power had turned a potential disaster into a significant defensive victory. By mid-afternoon, it was clear the immediate threat had been neutralized. The crucial hours following the invasion had been survived. Allied forces were assuring strength and expanding their beachheads. The German opportunity to push them back into the sea had passed. Jack's Knighthunter unit, reduced now to just his single operational tank after Henderson's was disabled by a final German salvo, had played a critical role far beyond their minimal numbers. As evening approached, Jack received new orders. His tank and surviving crew were to report to the newly established headquarters for debriefing. Their specialized knowledge of German armor and the performance of their modified Shermans was considered invaluable intelligence. At headquarters, Jack found General Eisenhower himself reviewing the day's events with his senior commanders. The Supreme Allied commander looked exhausted but determined as reports came in from all 5 landing beaches. Jack's debriefing was conducted by a team of intelligence officers and technical specialists. Every detail of their engagements with German armor was recorded, with particular emphasis on the effectiveness of their modifications in specialized ammunition. Major Harrington, one technical officer asked, "In your assessment, how significant was the elimination of Colonel Kessler's Tiger unit to the overall success of the Omaha Beach breakout?" Jack considered his answer carefully. "Critical. Our intelligence correctly identified that unit as the most dangerous immediate threat to our armor. Had Kessler's full unit engaged our regular tank battalions, losses would have been devastating. The questioning continued for hours, interrupted only when a familiar figure entered the tent. General William Sherman, now sporting 2 stars, looked grim as he approached. "Jack, walk with me," he said simply. Outside, in the gathering darkness illuminated by the distant flashes of ongoing combat, Sherman spoke plainly. "You've done exceptional work. The Knighthunter concept proved its worth today." "At a high cost," Jack acknowledged. Sherman nodded solemnly. "War always comes at a high cost, but I have news that may be harder for you to bear than your own losses." Jack tensed, immediately thinking of Kate back in England. "Lieutenant Rodriguez died yesterday," Sherman said quietly. "His wounds from Italy were more severe than initially assessed. Infection set in suddenly. He was gone before anyone realized the danger. Eddie, the mathematical genius who had calculated shell trajectories and armor angles with uncanny precision, gone not from enemy action but from wounds received months earlier. The Steel Brotherhood is down to just you and Doc now," Sherman continued gently. Jack absorbed this news with outward stoicism, but inwardly the pain was sharp. Bull and Eddie gone. Half of the Brotherhood lost. "There's something else." Sherman reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "This came through just before the invasion. I was holding it until I saw you personally." Jack opened the box to find a gold oak leaf. Major's insignia, but not standard issue. This was a special set, custom made. "Eddie had them commissioned for all 4 of you," Sherman explained. "His note said they were forged from steel salvaged from your first prototype Sherman at Aberdeen. 1 set for each of the Brotherhood. He wanted you to have yours regardless of what happened to him." Jack closed his hand around the insignia, feeling the weight of it physically and symbolically. "The remaining sets?" he asked quietly. "1 for Doc, of course. Bulge will go to his family in Kansas." Sherman paused. "Eddie's sister asked that his be buried with him." Jack nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "We're still making a difference," and he finally said, "even those we've lost. Their work continues in every modified tank, in every crew that survives because of what we've learned." Sherman placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "That's the legacy of the Steel Brotherhood. Not just the men, but the ideas you forged together." As they stood looking out over the beachhead where thousands of American troops continued to pour ashore, Jack felt both the weight of loss and the responsibility of carrying forward. The pocket watch in his pocket seemed to tick more loudly, counting not just the time until he might see Kate again, but the precious moments of life itself. The invasion had succeeded. The war was far from over, but this critical day had been won, and the Steel Brotherhood, though diminished, had played its part. Chapter 7, Breaking Point. The weeks following D-Day passed in a blur of constant movement and combat as Allied forces pushed inland from the Normandy beachheads. Major Jack Harrington's role evolved rapidly, his expertise in tank warfare making him an invaluable asset as American armor engaged German panzer divisions across the Norman countryside. The Knighthunter concept had been expanded. What began as Jack's small, specialized unit grew into a full company of modified Shermans dedicated to engaging and neutralizing German heavy tanks. With each engagement, they refined their techniques and equipment. Jack's technical expertise, combined with his frontline combat experience, placed him in a unique position. He split his time between field operations and technical assessment, personally testing modifications before approving them for wider implementation. Doc remained at his side, now serving as both medical officer for the Knighthunter Company and Jack's executive officer. Their shared history and complementary skills made them an effective team, though both felt the absence of Bull and Eddie keenly. It was during this period that Jack received his most challenging assignment yet. General Patton, newly arrived in France with the Third Army, requested Jack's presence at his headquarters. The legendary general received Jack in his characteristic manner, direct and without preamble. "Major Harrington, I've read every report on your tank modifications and tactics. Impressive work. Now I need you to solve a new problem." Patton unfolded a map showing the area east of St. Lo, where American forces were preparing for Operation Cobra, the major breakout attempt from the Normandy beachhead. "Intelligence reports a new German tank in this sector, something we haven't encountered before." Jack studied the map with growing concern. "New design, sir?" "The King Tiger," Patton said grimly. "Heavier armor than the standard Tiger. Improved gun, supposedly impervious to our current tank rounds even at point-blank range." The implications were serious. If the reports were accurate, Even the modified Shermans of the Knighthunter units would be ineffective against this new threat. The King Tiger, or Tiger II, represented the pinnacle of German heavy tank design. Weighing nearly 70 tons, it combined the thick, sloped armor of the Panther with the massive firepower of the Tiger I. Its frontal armor was 150 millimeter thick at a perfect 45-degree angle, making it effectively 215 millimeter thick against incoming rounds. The powerful 88 millimeter KWK-43 gun could penetrate any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 2,500 meters. How many? Jack asked. Intelligence isn't certain. At least 5, possibly more. They're being held in reserve for a counterattack against our breakout attempt. Patton fixed Jack with an intense stare. I need those tanks neutralized before they can engage our main armored thrust. Your Knighthunters are the only unit with the experience and equipment to have a chance. Jack considered the challenge. Sir, if these reports are accurate, even our modified Shermans may not be able to penetrate their frontal armor. Then find another way, Patton replied without hesitation. Flank them, ambush them, use artillery, whatever it takes. But those tanks cannot be allowed to hit our main force. The mission was clear, if daunting. Jack would have 3 days to prepare before Operation Cobra began. Returning to his unit, Jack gathered his officers to plan their approach. The Knighthunter Company now consisted of 15 modified Shermans, each with experienced crews who had survived multiple engagements with German armor. This is different from anything we faced before, Jack explained, sharing the limited intelligence on the King Tiger. Standard frontal engagement won't work. We need to be smarter. He sketched the known details of the King Tiger on a blackboard, its dimensions, armor thickness, gun capabilities. The technical specifications were sobering. Frontal armor that no Allied tank gun could penetrate. A gun that could destroy a Sherman at extreme ranges. Limited mobility due to its massive weight, but devastating if properly positioned. We can't match it head-on, Jack concluded, so we don't try. We use our advantages, mobility, numbers, and terrain knowledge, to create situations where we can engage from the sides or rear. Over the next 48 hours, they developed a multi-layered strategy. Engineers would prepare camouflaged anti-tank ditches to channel the German tanks into predetermined killing zones. Artillery would be pre-registered on likely approach routes. The Knighthunters would deploy in concealed positions to engage from the flanks and rear. But Jack knew they needed more technical intelligence on the new German tanks. The night before Operation Cobra was scheduled to begin, he made a decision that Doc immediately protested. A reconnaissance mission? Behind German lines? You're the company commander, Jack. Send someone else. Jack shook his head. I need to see these King Tigers myself, assess their vulnerabilities firsthand. No one else has the technical knowledge to know exactly what to look for. Despite continued objections, Jack prepared for the mission. He would take a small team of volunteers, infiltrate the German-held territory under cover of darkness, observe the King Tiger unit, and return before dawn. As they prepared to depart, a messenger arrived with an unexpected communication. Catherine Sullivan had arrived at the forward base area with urgent technical information regarding the King Tiger tanks. Jack immediately postponed the reconnaissance mission. Kate's arrival meant she had critical information that might change their entire approach. He found her at the Technical Support Unit attached to 3rd Army Headquarters, surrounded by engineering drawings and armor samples. Kate, Jack greeted her with professional restraint, despite his personal joy at seeing her again. What brings you to the front? She looked up, momentarily allowing a smile before returning to her professional demeanor. Aberdeen captured technical data on the King Tiger from documents seized during the Normandy landings. I've been analyzing the design for vulnerabilities. Jack examined the drawings she had spread across the makeshift workbench. The King Tiger was indeed formidable. Frontal armor approaching 150 millimeters in thickness. The legendary 88 millimeter gun, now even more powerful in its latest version. A complex transmission system that powered the massive vehicle. Anything we can exploit? Jack asked, his trained eye already searching for weaknesses in the imposing design. Kate pointed to several specific areas on the drawings. 3 potential vulnerabilities. The turret ring remains a weak point despite attempts to reinforce it. The engine compartment ventilation can be penetrated by specialized rounds. And most importantly, the lower front plate has a ballistic shot trap at this junction point. Jack studied the details, his mind already calculating firing angles and ammunition requirements. Can our 76 millimeter guns penetrate even at these weak points? Not with standard ammunition, Kate admitted, but I've brought prototypes of a new round. Tungsten core with an improved ballistic cap and increased propellant charge. Limited supply, but enough for your company. She indicated several wooden crates that had been unloaded from her Jeep. 50 rounds total. Use them wisely. This was exactly the intelligence they needed. Jack immediately revised their tactical plan, focusing on the specific vulnerabilities Kate had identified. As they worked through the technical details, Kate updated Jack on developments back in England, the continued refinement of tank designs based on combat feedback, the preparation for future operations as the Allied advance continued. Eddie's work on shell trajectory calculations has been implemented across all new ammunition production, she told him, unaware of the recent news. The improved accuracy is saving lives. Jack's expression darkened. Kate, Eddie didn't make it. His wounds from Italy. Her face fell as she absorbed this news. I didn't know. We were collaborating by letter on the new ammunition design just 3 weeks ago. Jack nodded sadly. He worked until the end. His final designs are what you brought today. They shared a moment of silence for their fallen friend and colleague. Then, with the grim determination that characterized their professional relationship, they returned to the technical problems at hand. By morning, Jack had completely revised the Knighthunter battle plan. Using Kate's intelligence, they would focus on engaging the King Tigers from specific angles that targeted the identified vulnerabilities. The new ammunition would be distributed to the best gunners in the company. Kate would remain at the forward base, analyzing results and ready to suggest additional modifications as combat experience with the King Tigers accumulated. Operation Cobra began with a massive aerial bombardment that unfortunately fell short in some areas, causing American casualties. Despite this difficult start, ground forces began their advance, and the Knight-Hunters moved into their prepared positions to intercept the expected German armor counterattack. The waiting was tense. Hours passed with only scattered engagements as American forces pushed forward against determined German resistance. Then, late in the afternoon, forward observers reported enemy armor moving into position. Contact imminent, Jack informed his company over the radio. All units hold fire until targets are in optimal position. Confirm visual identification of King Tigers before engaging. Through his binoculars, Jack observed the German armor advancing to counter the American breakthrough attempt. Among the Panzer IVs and Standard Tigers, the massive silhouettes of the King Tigers were unmistakable. 5 King Tigers confirmed, he reported, moving in formation with supporting armor. The trap was set. Artillery opened fire on the supporting German infantry and lighter vehicles, isolating the heavy tanks. Anti-tank ditches and minefields channeled their movement toward the prepared killing zones. When the first King Tiger entered the primary engagement area, Jack gave the order. Knighthunter actual to all units. Commence firing. Target weak points as briefed. The modified Shermans opened fire from concealed positions on the flanks in rear of the German formation. Their specialized rounds struck with precision at the vulnerability points Kate had identified. The effect was devastating. 2 King Tigers were disabled in the initial volley, one with a penetration through the turret ring, another through the engine compartment. The remaining 3 returned fire, their powerful 80mm guns demolishing anything they hit. A Knighthunter Sherman erupted in flames as a direct hit penetrated its frontal armor. Another lost its track to a near miss, but continued firing from its stationary position. The battle became a deadly chess match, with Jack directing his units to maintain positional advantage while the German tanks tried to bring their superior frontal armor to bear against the American positions. Shift to position Delta, Jack ordered as German artillery began zeroing in on their locations. Maintain flanking angles. The mobile strategy worked. Unable to bring their strongest armor to bear against the constantly shifting American positions, the German tanks suffered. A 3rd King Tiger lost its mobility to a well-placed shot through its rear drive sprocket. The tide turned definitively when American fighter bombers arrived, targeting the immobilized German tanks with rockets and bombs. The remaining King Tigers began a fighting withdrawal, one succumbing to a final shot from Jack's tank that penetrated its turret ring exactly as Kate had predicted. By evening, the Knighthunter Company had achieved an astounding victory. 4 King Tigers destroyed or disabled, the 5th damaged and retreating. American armor could now advance without facing the devastating power of these new German super tanks. The cost had been high. 3 Knight-Hunters destroyed, 4 more damaged, 7 men killed, 12 wounded. But Operation Cobra could proceed, the major threat to its success neutralized. As Jack supervised the recovery of damaged vehicles and evacuation of wounded personnel, General Patton himself arrived to assess the outcome. The general surveyed the battlefield, noting the massive hulks of the destroyed King Tigers with evident satisfaction. "Impressive work, Major," Patton acknowledged. "These monsters could have stopped our entire breakout cold." "Thank you, sir." Dr. Sullivan's technical intelligence was the key. Patton nodded, already looking ahead to the next phase of operations. "I want your Knighthunter attached directly to 3rd Army headquarters as a rapid response force. When these beasts appear, I need your people there immediately." "Yes, sir," Jack acknowledged. "We'll need replacements for our losses, and more of the specialized ammunition." "You'll get whatever you need," Patton assured him. "This is exactly the kind of aggressive, innovative action that wins wars." As Patton departed, Doc approached with the casualty report. The details were grim, but could have been far worse without their specialized preparation. "We've been ordered to pull back to the reserve area for refit and reinforcement," Doc informed him. "Kate's technical team will meet us there to implement additional modifications based on today's engagement." Jack nodded, his mind already processing the lessons from the battle. "The new ammunition worked exactly as designed, but we need better protection for our own tanks. The King Tiger's 88 cut through our frontal armor like it wasn't there." "Kate mentioned she's working on a composite armor concept," Doc replied. "Something about layering different materials to disrupt the penetrator's energy." The continuous evolution of tank warfare demanded constant adaptation. What worked today might be inadequate tomorrow as both sides develop new weapons and countermeasures. At the reserve area, Jack found Kate supervising the implementation of emergency modifications to replacement tanks being prepared for the Knighthunter Company. Despite hours of continuous work, she appeared energized by the technical challenges. "Your intelligence saved us today," Jack told her as they examined one of the destroyed King Tigers that had been towed back for technical analysis. Kate circled the massive German tank with professional interest, examining the penetration points. Eddie's calculations were perfect, his last gift to the Brotherhood. They worked through the night, documenting every detail of the engagement and preparing recommendations for both immediate tactical adjustments and longer-term design modifications. Their professional partnership had developed an intuitive quality, each anticipating the other's thoughts and building upon them. Dawn found them still working, fueled by coffee and the urgent knowledge that more King Tigers would appear as the German High Command committed their reserves to stop the American breakout. "You should rest," Jack suggested, noting Kate's exhaustion despite her determined focus. "So should you," she countered. "When was the last time you slept?" Neither could remember clearly. The pace of operations since D-Day had been relentless, with each day bringing new challenges requiring immediate solutions. They found a brief moment of respite sitting on the engine deck of a Sherman being repaired, watching the sunrise over the Norman countryside. For a few precious minutes, they allowed themselves to be simply Jack and Kate, not Major Harrington and Dr. Sullivan. After the war, Jack began tentatively, "I've been thinking about what comes next." Kate glanced at him. "And? My father's shop in Pennsylvania is still there. My brother's been running it. But I'm thinking bigger now. Not just repair work, but design and manufacturing." "Harrington Industries?" Kate suggested with a small smile. Jack nodded. "Something like that. Taking what we've learned here and applying it to peacetime machinery, construction equipment, agricultural machinery." "Sounds like you have it all planned out," Kate observed. "Almost," Jack admitted. "There's one critical position I haven't filled. Chief engineer. I need someone who understands materials, stress factors, power-to-weight ratios." Kate's smile widened slightly. "Sounds like a challenging position. The candidate would need extensive technical qualifications. And patience," Jack added. "The company president can be stubborn about design choices." Their hands found each other on the warm steel of the tank deck, hidden from view between them. The brief contact conveyed more than words could express given their circumstances. The moment was interrupted by a messenger calling for Jack. New intelligence had arrived. German armor was massing for another counterattack against the Cobra breakout. The Knighthunter would be needed again. As they returned to their professional roles, Jack and Kate exchanged a look of understanding. The future they discussed would have to wait. For now, there was a war to win, and they each had critical roles to play. The Steel Brotherhood had been reduced to just Jack and Doc, but its spirit and purpose continued. With each tank saved by their modifications, with each crew that survived to fight another day because of their innovations, the legacy of Thomas Harrington's vision endured. The tools that kept America free were being forged in the crucible of combat, tempered by experience and engineering. And despite the losses, despite the hardships, Jack found purpose in continuing the work that had begun generations before him. The pocket watch still kept perfect time, and somewhere beyond the horizon of war, a future waited. One built not on destruction, but on creation, not on taking lives, but on improving them. But first, there were tanks to build, battles to win, and men to bring home safely. The Steel Brotherhood had work to do. The cold rain of autumn washed over the Sherman tanks as they rolled eastward through liberated France. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Harrington stood in the commander's hatch of the lead tank, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of German resistance. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead and ran in rivulets down his weathered face, but he barely noticed. 4 months had passed since Operation Cobra had shattered the German defenses in Normandy. 4 months of relentless advance as Allied forces pushed toward the German border. The Knighthunter's had grown from a specialized company into an elite battalion under Jack's command, their reputation for tank-killing prowess earning them both respect from Allied commanders and fear from German panzer units. "Weather report says snow by nightfall," Doc called up from inside the turret. "First winter storm of the season." Jack nodded grimly. Winter would change everything. Mud would freeze, rivers would become barriers, machinery would strain against the cold, and the Germans would be fighting with increasing desperation as the Allies approached their homeland. "Pass the word to all units," Jack ordered. "Full winterization protocols tonight during maintenance. Check antifreeze levels. Pack track joints with low-temperature grease." The column continued its advance. 25 modified Shermans moving in practice formation through the French countryside. Intelligence reports indicated minimal resistance in this sector, but Jack took no chances. German tactics had evolved, with small teams of infantry carrying portable anti-tank weapons hiding in forests and villages. They reached their objective by mid-afternoon, a strategic crossroads that would support the coming Allied push toward Germany. As his tanks secured the area, Jack consulted his maps in the command tank, planning the next day's operations. A radio operator interrupted his work. "Colonel, priority message from Division HQ." Jack took the handset. "Harrington." "Colonel, this is General Norris. We have a situation developing north of your position. German armor, estimated battalion strength, has broken through our lines near Aachen. Intelligence confirms presence of King Tigers and new Jag Panther tank destroyers." Jack's expression tightened. The Jag Panther was Germany's newest tank destroyer, combining the Panther tank's chassis with a devastating 88mm gun and sloped armor that made it nearly impervious to frontal attack. With a front glacis plate 80mm thick at an extreme 55-degree angle, it effectively had 140mm protection against direct fire. "Your Knighthunter's are the closest heavy armor unit with the experience to counter this threat," Norris continued. "I need you to move immediately to reinforce the 4th Armored Division. They're taking heavy losses." "Understood, sir. We're moving out now." Jack replaced the handset and immediately began issuing orders. Within 30 minutes, the entire battalion was moving north at maximum speed, pushing their engines to the limit. Jack knew the risk of mechanical breakdown increased with such treatment, but the tactical situation demanded it. Standard Sherman units would be slaughtered by King Tigers and Jag Panthers without specialized support. Night fell as they continued their journey, forcing them to use minimal lighting to avoid attracting German aircraft. The promised snow began around midnight, adding another layer of difficulty to their movement. They reached the embattled sector shortly before dawn. The evidence of recent heavy fighting was everywhere. Burning American tanks littered the approaches to a small Belgian town that had been reduced to rubble by artillery. Wounded soldiers were being evacuated as fresh infantry moved up to reinforce the tenuous American line. Jack reported to the local commander, Colonel James Wilson of the 4th Armored. The man looked exhausted, his eyes hollow from lack of sleep and the strain of command. "Thank God you're here, Harrington," Wilson greeted him. "We've lost 17 tanks in the last 12 hours. Those new German tank destroyers are murder. We can't penetrate their frontal armor even at point-blank range." Jack examined the tactical maps while Wilson explained the situation. The German breakthrough had created a salient about 5 miles deep into American lines. Intelligence suggested they were preparing for a larger offensive, using this attack as a testing ground for new equipment and tactics. "What air support is available?" Jack asked, already forming a battle plan. "Minimal. This weather has grounded most aircraft," Wilson replied. "And even when they can fly, The Germans have moved in mobile anti-aircraft batteries. Jack nodded, unsurprised. The Germans were adapting to Allied air superiority by creating ground-based counters. The technological chess match continued. We'll need to handle this the old-fashioned way, he decided. My Knighthunter's will move into position before dawn and engage from prepared defensive positions. Your remaining tanks can provide fire support and target the lighter German vehicles. The plan was quickly developed and communicated to all units. Jack's Knighthunter's would deploy along a ridgeline overlooking the likely German advance route, using their specialized ammunition and modified gun stabilizers to engage the German heavies from optimal angles. Dawn broke gray and threatening, the snowfall having transitioned to a freezing drizzle that reduced visibility and made the ground treacherously slick. Through the morning mist, the sound of German tank engines could be heard as they maneuvered into attack positions. All units maintain radio discipline, Jack ordered. Fire only on my command. Target priority is Jag Panthers first, then King Tigers. The waiting was always the hardest part. Jack used the time to study the German formations through his binoculars as they emerged from the mist. Their tactical deployment was professional and disciplined, with tank destroyers positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire while standard tanks protected their flanks. They've learned, Doc observed quietly. They're not exposing their weak points anymore. Jack nodded grimly. Then we create new weaknesses. He ordered a battery of 155mm artillery to fire smoke rounds onto the battlefield, disrupting the carefully planned German fields of fire. As confusion momentarily gripped the enemy formation, Jack gave the order to engage. The Knighthunter's opened fire from their elevated positions, their high-velocity guns delivering the specialized tungsten core rounds with deadly precision. The new ammunition, developed by Kate Sullivan's team specifically to counter German heavy armor, performed admirably. Where standard rounds would have bounced harmlessly off the angled armor of the Jag Panthers, these penetrated at the junction points between plates. The Germans responded with disciplined precision, their gunners quickly identifying the American positions and returning fire. Their 88mm guns had greater range and hitting power than even the modified American 76mm weapons. A Knighthunter Sherman erupted in flames as a direct hit penetrated its frontal armor. Another lost its turret traverse when a shell struck its mechanism. The battle quickly devolved into a long-range duel between tanks, each side seeking to exploit weaknesses in the other's position. Jack directed his forces with the calm precision that had become his trademark, shifting units to maintain tactical advantage and focusing fire on specific targets to ensure kills rather than merely damaging enemy vehicles. By mid-morning, the German attack had stalled. 7 of their heavy vehicles lay burning on the battlefield, while Jack had lost 3 Shermans with 4 more damaged but repairable. They're pulling back, Doc reported, observing through the gunner's scope, regrouping beyond that tree line. Jack knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The Germans would analyze their losses, adapt their tactics, and attack again. It was the nature of modern armored warfare, an ongoing evolution of measure and countermeasure. Maintenance crews forward, he ordered. I want all operational tanks refueled and rearmed within the hour. We'll use the time to adjust our positions. As engineers worked to recover damaged vehicles and crews rotated for brief rest periods, Jack received word that a technical team had arrived from headquarters. Kate Sullivan was leading a group of specialists to assess the performance of their latest modifications against the new German armor. Jack found her examining the wreckage of a destroyed Jag Panther that had been pulled back behind American lines. Despite the mud and cold, she was focused entirely on the technical details of the German vehicle. Their frontal armor is even better than our intelligence suggested, Kate greeted him without preamble. 80-degree slope and 80mm thickness at the critical points. No wonder standard rounds are ineffective. Jack joined her examination, noting the precision engineering of the German design. Their manufacturing quality is improving despite the bombing campaign. Slave labor, Kate replied grimly. They're using captured workers from occupied territories in underground factories our planes can't reach. This was the darker side of the technological battle they fought, the human cost behind the machines. Your modifications performed well, Kate continued, shifting to more positive ground. The kill ratio is significantly better than standard units. Not good enough, Jack replied, his mind on the crews lost despite their specialized equipment. We need something more effective against these new designs. Kate nodded, understanding his frustration. That's why I'm here. We've developed a new round type based on captured German tungsten core technology, higher velocity, better penetration characteristics. She led him to a truck where crates of ammunition were being unloaded. Limited supply for now, but enough to re-equip your battalion. This was welcome news, but Jack knew it was just another step in the ongoing technological race. As they improved their ammunition, the Germans would enhance their armor. The cycle would continue until one side could no longer sustain the development effort. We're also installing improved fire control systems in your replacement tanks, Kate added. Gyroscopic stabilization that allows accurate fire while moving. These incremental improvements would save lives. Jack made arrangements for immediate installation and training on the new equipment. As night fell, intelligence reported the Germans were bringing up reinforcements, including additional heavy tanks. The next day's battle would be even more challenging. Jack found a moment of relative privacy with Kate in the battalion command post, a damaged farmhouse serving as their tactical headquarters. "You shouldn't be this close to the front," he said quietly, concern evident despite his professional tone. Kate's expression remained determined. "I need to see the equipment in action. Field testing under combat conditions is the only way to validate our designs." Jack recognized the logic but couldn't entirely suppress his personal worry. "At least stay at division headquarters for the next engagement. You can analyze the results afterward." "That's not how the Steel Brotherhood works," she countered. "We test our designs in the field, remember? Your father's philosophy." She had him there. The mention of his father's approach to engineering resonated deeply. Thomas Harrington had always insisted on field testing his own work, believing that theoretical engineering without practical application was merely academic exercise. "At least promise me you'll stay with the recovery teams behind the front line," Jack conceded. Kate nodded her agreement. "I can work with that. The technical data is what matters, not my personal presence in the line of fire." Their conversation was interrupted by Doc's arrival with updated intelligence reports. The Germans were repositioning their forces for what appeared to be a major assault at dawn. Aerial reconnaissance, conducted during a brief break in the weather, had identified at least 20 heavy tanks and tank destroyers moving into attack positions. "They're committing everything they have," Doc observed. "This will be their maximum effort." Jack studied the maps, calculating options and risks. The tactical situation was challenging but not hopeless. With their improved ammunition and the defensive terrain, they had a fighting chance against the superior German vehicles. "We adjust our defense accordingly," Jack decided. "Depth rather than width. Let them penetrate initially, then hit them from multiple angles once they're committed." The strategy was a calculated risk. Allowing the German armor to advance would expose American infantry positions, but it would also create opportunities to strike at the less heavily armored sides and rear of the enemy vehicles. Jack briefed his company commanders on the revised plan, emphasizing the importance of disciplined fire and precise targeting. "We can't match them tank for tank," he explained. "We need to make every shot count." The night passed tensely, with sporadic artillery exchanges and reconnaissance patrols probing each side's positions. Jack managed a few hours of restless sleep, his dreams filled with burning tanks and the faces of men lost under his command. Dawn arrived with unexpected clarity, the storms having passed during the night to reveal a crystalline winter sky. The improved visibility would allow for air support if the weather held, potentially shifting the tactical balance in the Americans' favor. The German attack began with a massive artillery barrage that pounded American positions for 30 minutes before their armor advanced. Jack had anticipated this and positioned his forces in hardened shelters and defilated positions where the artillery would have minimal effect. As the barrage lifted, German armor began their advance. The Jagdpanthers led, their low profiles making difficult targets as they moved from cover to cover with surprising agility for such heavy vehicles. "Hold fire," Jack ordered as the enemy vehicles entered the outer engagement area. "Let them commit fully." The discipline of the Knighthunter's was absolute. Despite opportunities for long-range shots, every gun remained silent as the Germans advanced further into the carefully prepared killing zone. When the lead German vehicles reached the designated trigger point, Jack gave the order. "All units, commence firing." The battlefield erupted as the Shermans fired simultaneously from concealed positions. The new tungsten core rounds proved devastatingly effective, penetrating the angled armor of the Jagdpanthers where standard ammunition had failed. The Germans, realizing they had advanced into an ambush, responded with professional precision. Their remaining tanks deployed into defensive positions while continuing to advance, their powerful guns searching for the American firing positions. The battle evolved into a swirling melee of armored vehicles, each seeking advantageous firing positions while avoiding enemy fire. Jack directed his forces through the chaos, shifting units to maintain tactical advantage and focusing fire to ensure kills. Midway through the morning, the promised air support arrived. P-47 Thunderbolts swept low over the battlefield, their rockets and bombs adding to the destruction raining on the German forces. The combined arms attack broke the enemy's cohesion, transforming their orderly advance into individual survival efforts. By noon, it was clear the German attack had failed. 14 enemy heavy tanks lay destroyed across the battlefield, with the remaining vehicles in full retreat. The Knighthunter's had lost 5 Shermans destroyed and 7 damaged, a high cost but acceptable given the forces they had faced. As Jack supervised the battlefield recovery operations, directing the retrieval of damaged vehicles and evacuation of wounded personnel, he received urgent orders to report to Army headquarters. The nature of the summons was not specified, but its priority level suggested something significant had developed. Before departing, he sought out Kate, who was examining captured German equipment with her technical team. "New orders," he explained briefly. "I'm needed at headquarters." She looked up from her work, understanding the unspoken question. "I'll remain here until the technical assessment is complete. The data from this engagement is invaluable." Jack nodded, knowing she would be relatively safe now that the immediate threat had been neutralized. "Doc will coordinate any support you need." The journey to headquarters took several hours through the snow-covered Belgian countryside. Jack used the time to compile his preliminary battle report, documenting the performance of both the enhanced Shermans and the new ammunition types. He arrived at the sprawling headquarters complex near Liège to find it in a state of controlled chaos. Staff officers moved purposefully between buildings, and communication centers operated at full capacity. Something major was clearly underway. General Omar Bradley himself was waiting for Jack's arrival, a sign of the situation's seriousness. "Colonel Harrington, thank you for coming so quickly," Bradley greeted him. "We have a developing situation that requires your expertise." Jack followed the general into a secure briefing room where maps of the Ardennes region dominated the walls. Several other senior officers were already present, their expressions grave. "Intelligence has identified a massive German buildup in this sector," Bradley explained, indicating an area along the German-Belgian border. "We believe they're planning a major counteroffensive, possibly within the next 2 weeks." Jack studied the maps with growing concern. The Ardennes was considered a quiet sector, held primarily by inexperienced or resting divisions. The terrain was heavily forested and considered unsuitable for large-scale armored operations, which was precisely why it might be chosen for a surprise attack. "What armor assets do we have in the region?" Jack asked, already calculating requirements. "That's the problem," Bradley replied grimly. "The sector is lightly defended, with minimal tank support. Most of our armor is committed further north and south where we expected the fighting to be heaviest." The strategic vulnerability was obvious. If the Germans could punch through the thinly held Ardennes, they might drive all the way to Antwerp, splitting the Allied forces and potentially reversing months of hard-won advances. "We're repositioning forces as rapidly as possible," Bradley continued, "but it will take time. What we need immediately is expert assessment of the German armor capabilities and tactical recommendations for our defensive preparations." Jack now understood why he had been summoned. His Knight-Hunters had more experience fighting Germany's latest armored vehicles than any other unit. "I'll need my technical team," Jack stated. "Dr. Sullivan's expertise will be essential for accurate assessment." Bradley nodded agreement. "Already arranged. She's being brought here tomorrow. In the meantime, I need your initial evaluation based on your recent engagements." For the next several hours, Jack worked with the headquarters planning staff, sharing detailed insights on German armor tactics and the performance characteristics of their latest vehicles. His experience proved invaluable as the Allied command developed countermeasures against the anticipated offensive. Kate arrived the following day, bringing technical data from their recent battle. Together, they provided comprehensive analysis that shaped the defensive preparations throughout the Ardennes sector. "The weather is the critical factor," Jack explained during a senior staff briefing. "German heavy tanks are mechanically vulnerable in extreme cold. They'll attempt to maintain momentum to prevent breakdowns, which means they'll likely commit to major roads rather than cross-country movement." This insight allowed for more focused defensive preparations, concentrating anti-tank assets at key road junctions and likely approach routes. Despite the urgent preparations, Jack sensed an underlying skepticism among some staff officers. The Ardennes offensive theory contradicted the prevailing wisdom that Germany was too depleted to launch major operations. They're committing their strategic reserves, Jack argued in a planning session. This will be their last major offensive capability. They have to use it or lose it. His warnings were heeded by Bradley and Eisenhower, but translating their concerns into repositioned forces faced logistical challenges. The Allied armies were stretched thin across a broad front, and shifting significant forces required time they might not have. As December arrived with plunging temperatures and heavy snow, Jack's Knighthunter battalion was assigned to a strategic reserve position behind the Ardennes front. Their specialized anti-armor capabilities would be vital if the anticipated German offensive materialized. Kate remained attached to the technical support section at Bradley's headquarters, continuing to refine equipment modifications based on combat feedback. Her presence so close to the front lines was unusual for a civilian specialist, but her expertise was considered essential to the ongoing technological battle. On December 15th, Jack visited headquarters for final coordination before returning to his unit. He found Kate working late, analyzing reports of new German armor spotted near the front. Intelligence confirms they've moved at least 5 Panzer divisions into position, she informed him, including their newest units with King Tigers and Jag Tigers. The Jagdtiger was Germany's largest tank destroyer, mounting a massive 128mm gun capable of destroying any Allied tank at extreme ranges. Its appearance confirmed the seriousness of the coming offensive. Everything points to an imminent attack, Jack agreed. Yet some staff officers still believe it's merely defensive repositioning. Kate set aside her technical reports, her expression showing rare personal concern rather than professional focus. Your Knighthunter's will be right in their path if the attack comes where you predict. Jack nodded solemnly. That's where we need to be. No other unit has our experience against their heavy armor. They shared a moment of unspoken understanding. The coming battle would likely be the most challenging they had yet faced. The stakes were enormous, potentially determining whether the war ended in months or dragged on for another year. I've completed the modifications to your command tank, Kate said, changing to more practical matters. Additional frontal armor in the new fire control system. It should arrive at your position tomorrow. Jack appreciated her focus on the technical aspects they could control, rather than dwelling on the dangers ahead. It was how they had always operated, channeling concern into practical improvements that saved lives. The modifications have already saved hundreds of lives, Jack acknowledged. Whatever happens next, the Steel Brotherhood has fulfilled its purpose. Kate's expression softened slightly. The Brotherhood isn't finished yet. There's still work to do. Before Jack could respond, an aide rushed into the room. Colonel Harrington, urgent message from your battalion. German artillery has opened up all along the Ardennes front. Heavy barrage reported across a 50-mile sector. Jack and Kate exchanged knowing looks. The predicted offensive had begun. I need to get back to my unit, Jack said, already moving toward the door. Kate caught his arm briefly. The watch, she reminded him, still keeping perfect time. It was their private affirmation, a reminder of both past promises and future hopes. Jack nodded once, the gesture conveying everything words could not under the circumstances. The journey back to his battalion position was harrowing. The roads were clogged with vehicles as American forces responded to the sudden offensive. Artillery fire echoed through the forest, and the night sky was illuminated by flares and burning vehicles. Chapter 10 Into the Breach. Jack reached his command post shortly before midnight to find his executive officer, Major Phillips, coordinating their battle preparations. Germans broke through in multiple sectors, Phillips reported tersely. Panzer spearheads moving faster than expected. First and second platoons are already engaged near St. Vith. Jack immediately took command, assessing the rapidly developing situation. The German offensive was more powerful and better executed than even he had anticipated. Their armored columns were driving deep into Allied territory, bypassing strong points and creating confusion throughout the American lines. Status of our reserves? Jack asked, studying the tactical maps. 3rd and 4th platoons at full readiness, Phillips confirmed. Engineering team completed modifications on 12 tanks. The remainder are standard configuration. Jack made his decision quickly. Move the modified tanks to defensive positions along these road junctions. Standard units provide mobile reserve capability. Priority targets remain German heavy armor. Throughout the night, the situation deteriorated further. German armor pushed relentlessly through gaps in the American lines, creating pockets of isolated resistance. Communication became increasingly difficult as enemy forces cut telephone lines and radio jamming disrupted wireless transmission. By dawn on December 16th, the full scale of the German offensive was becoming apparent. This was no limited attack but a massive operation involving multiple panzer armies driving toward the Meuse River and ultimately Antwerp. Jack's Knighthunter's found themselves in the path of the 1st SS Panzer Division, one of Germany's elite armored units. The clash when it came was brutal and unforgiving. German Tiger tanks supported by infantry attacked the American positions around St. Vith, attempting to secure a critical road junction. Jack's modified Shermans engaged from prepared defensive positions, using their enhanced ammunition and improved fire control systems to maximum advantage. The technical improvements proved their worth as the Knighthunter's destroyed 7 German tanks in the initial engagement while losing only 2 of their own. But the Germans had numerical superiority and continued to press the attack with fresh vehicles. "They're trying to flank our position from the north," Phillips reported as a new German thrust developed. Jack redirected his mobile reserve to counter the threat, personally leading a platoon of Shermans in a rapid movement to block the enemy advance. They arrived just as German Panthers were breaking through a thin screen of American infantry. "Engage at will," Jack ordered, as his tanks deployed into firing positions. "Target lead vehicles first." The ensuing battle was fought at point-blank range, with tanks maneuvering between buildings and through narrow streets. Jack's command tank destroyed 2 Panthers in quick succession, the new fire control system allowing accurate shooting despite the rapid movement. But the Germans kept coming, their determination matching their tactical skill. A King Tiger appeared at the end of the street, its massive 80mm gun capable of penetrating any American tank from any angle. "Target that King Tiger," Jack ordered, recognizing the immediate threat. 3 Shermans fired simultaneously, their rounds striking the German behemoth from different angles. 2 bounced harmlessly off its thick frontal armor, but the third found a vulnerability where the turret joined the hull. The King Tiger erupted in flames, its ammunition cooking off in a spectacular explosion that temporarily halted the German advance. But more enemy tanks were already moving up to replace it. Throughout the day, the battle seesawed across the contested ground. The Knighthunter's inflicted heavy losses on the German armor, but were gradually forced back by the sheer weight of the enemy attack. By evening, they had withdrawn to defensive positions on the outskirts of St. Vith, part of a shrinking American perimeter. Jack's battalion had been reduced to 11 operational tanks. Maintenance crews worked desperately to repair damaged vehicles, but spare parts were limited and some damage was beyond field repair capabilities. "Division orders," Phillips reported after establishing brief radio contact with headquarters. "We're to hold St. Vith at all costs. It's critical to delaying the German advance." Jack understood the strategic importance. Every hour they delayed the German panzers was another hour for Allied reinforcements to arrive from other sectors. The outcome of the entire battle might depend on their ability to hold this junction. "We'll hold," he assured his officers. "Redistribute ammunition, priority to anti-tank rounds. Establish interlocking fields of fire covering all approach routes." As night fell, bringing temperatures well below freezing, Jack received an unexpected radio message from Army headquarters. Kate Sullivan was being sent forward with emergency technical support in a convoy of replacement vehicles. The message included specific coordinates for a rendezvous point behind their current positions. Jack was torn between professional appreciation for the reinforcement and personal concern for Kate's safety. The front lines were fluid, with German infiltration teams operating throughout the area. Any movement was hazardous. "I'll take 2 tanks to secure the rendezvous point," he decided. "Phillips, you have command until I return." The journey to the designated coordinates was tense, with visibility limited by darkness and sporadic snowfall. Jack's small detachment moved cautiously, aware that German patrols could be anywhere in the confused battlefield. They reached the rendezvous point to find Kate already there, supervising the offloading of equipment from a convoy of trucks. 4 Sherman tanks with extensive modifications were being prepared for immediate combat deployment. "These were intended for testing next month," Kate explained as Jack approached. "I convinced headquarters to release them immediately given the situation." Jack examined the modified tanks with professional interest. The changes were extensive, incorporating every enhancement they had developed over the past year. Improved armor configuration, enhanced fire control systems, more powerful engines to compensate for the additional weight. "They're not fully field tested," Kate cautioned, "but they incorporate all our latest improvements. At this point, we'll take any advantage we can get," Jack acknowledged. How many crews did you bring? None, Kate replied. Headquarters couldn't spare trained personnel. I brought the tanks and technical support team, but you'll need to provide crews. This complicated matters, but Jack was already formulating a solution. We'll consolidate our existing crews and leave the more damaged tanks behind. As the technical team worked to prepare the new vehicles, Jack and Kate conferred on the tactical situation. The entire front is in chaos, Kate reported. German armored columns have penetrated up to 20 miles in some sectors. Bastonia is surrounded. 7th Armored is being cut to pieces trying to hold St. Vith. Jack studied her hastily drawn map. We're becoming isolated. The German plan is to encircle and destroy each American unit piecemeal while their main force drives for the Meuse. Can you hold? Kate asked directly. We have to, Jack replied simply. Every hour we delay them is critical. The preparation of the new tanks continued through the night. Kate's technical team worked alongside Jack's maintenance personnel, transferring essential equipment from damaged vehicles to the new arrivals and briefing crews on the modified systems. By dawn, they were ready to move out. The convoy would return to safer territory while the Knighthunters, now reinforced with the 4 new tanks, would return to the defensive perimeter around St. Vith. The moment of parting came as the first light of day illuminated the snow-covered landscape. Kate's team needed to return to headquarters with the technical data they had collected, but the route was increasingly dangerous as German forces expanded their control of the region. I should stay with the technical team, Kate said, though her tone suggested reluctance. We can provide better support from a fixed facility. Jack understood the professional logic but recognized the personal conflict beneath it. Your team can handle the technical aspects. You've trained them well. What remained unspoken was his concern for her safety. The fluid battlefield made any movement dangerous, but remaining in the shrinking perimeter around St. Vith might be even more hazardous. There's a field hospital at Spa, Jack continued. They need your expertise on treating burn injuries from tank crews. You can do more good there than here. It was a professional rationale for a personal concern, but Kate recognized both levels of his meaning. The modifications are complete, she acknowledged. The tanks will either perform as designed or they won't. My presence won't change that now. Their farewell was necessarily brief and outwardly professional, mindful of the personnel around them. But as Kate prepared to depart with the returning convoy, she pressed something into Jack's hand. This kept perfect time through everything, she said quietly. It should see you through this as well. It was his father's pocket watch, the one she had safeguarded for him since before D-Day. Jack was momentarily speechless at the gesture. I expect it back when this is over, Kate added with forced lightness. In working condition, Jack managed a smile despite the gravity of their situation. Count on it. As the convoy departed, Jack returned to his command tank with renewed determination. The watch in his pocket felt like both a talisman and a promise, something to fight for beyond the strategic necessities of war. The 9th twist of fate was about to unfold, one that would change Jack's perspective on the war and humanity itself. The reinforced Knighthunter battalion returned to St. Vith to find the situation deteriorating rapidly. German forces had nearly encircled the town, with only a narrow corridor still connecting it to other American units. The defense was becoming increasingly desperate as ammunition ran low and casualties mounted. Jack's return with 4 new tanks provided a crucial morale boost to the beleaguered defenders. The modified Shermans were immediately positioned at critical junctions where they could best counter German armor thrusts. Throughout December 17th and 18th, the Knighthunters fought a series of intense engagements against German panzer units attempting to complete the encirclement of St. Vith. The enhanced tanks performed admirably, confirming the value of the modifications Kate and her team had developed. On the morning of December 19th, Jack received orders that both relieved and concerned him. With St. Vith nearly surrounded and untenable, the remaining American forces were ordered to withdraw through the narrowing corridor, still connecting them to friendly lines. We're to act as rearguard, Jack informed his officers during a hasty briefing. Our mission is to delay the German advance long enough for the infantry to withdraw safely. It was a dangerous assignment. Rearguard actions historically resulted in high casualties for the covering force, which often sacrificed itself to protect the main body's retreat. 3rd and 4th platoons will establish blocking positions here and here, Jack indicated on the map. 1st and 2nd platoons form a mobile reserve to counter breakthrough attempts. We hold for 6 hours, then conduct a fighting withdrawal along this route. The plan was sound but depended on precise timing and coordination. If they withdrew too soon, the retreating infantry would be exposed. If they remained too long, they risked being completely cut off. As the main body of American forces began their withdrawal under cover of morning fog, Jack's Knighthunters moved into their assigned positions. The modified tanks, with their superior firepower, were distributed among the platoons to provide maximum tactical flexibility. The German attack, when it came, was precisely coordinated and executed with professional skill. Artillery preparation preceded armored thrusts along multiple axes, probing for weaknesses in the American defensive line. Jack directed his forces with the calm precision that had become his hallmark, shifting units to counter German movements and concentrating fire on priority targets. The battle became a tactical chess match, with each side seeking to outmaneuver the other in the confined battlefield of the town and its approaches. By mid-afternoon, the scheduled withdrawal time approached. Most of the infantry had successfully evacuated, but the German pressure was intensifying as they sensed the American defense weakening. "Begin withdrawal by platoons," Jack ordered. 4th platoon first, then 3rd. 1st and 2nd maintain defensive positions until others are clear. The complex maneuver began as planned, with platoons leapfrogging backward while maintaining covering fire for each other. Jack's command tank remained with the final group, ensuring all operational vehicles escaped. It was during this final withdrawal phase that disaster struck. A previously undetected German Jagdtiger opened fire from an elevated position overlooking the escape route. Its massive 128mm shell struck Jack's tank directly on the turret ring, the one vulnerability even their enhanced armor couldn't fully protect. The impact was catastrophic. The turret mechanism jammed and electrical systems failed throughout the vehicle. Smoke began filling the crew compartment as hydraulic fluid ignited. "Everyone out," Jack ordered, already moving to assist his driver who was injured by the impact. Doc helped extract the wounded man, while the loader and radio operator escaped through their hatches. Jack was the last to leave the disabled tank, pausing only to grab his map case and the precious pocket watch from his personal storage compartment. They had barely cleared the vehicle when German machine gun fire swept the area, forcing them to take cover in a nearby drainage ditch. Jack assessed their situation grimly. His command tank was disabled. They were separated from the rest of the withdrawing force, and German infantry was closing in on their position. "We move along this ditch until we reach the tree line," Jack decided, orienting himself using landmarks he had memorized. "Then we follow the stream bed toward our lines." The wounded driver could walk but required assistance. Doc supported him while Jack took point, navigating through the snow-covered terrain as darkness began to fall. The temperature was dropping rapidly, creating a new threat beyond the enemy forces searching for them. Their progress was painfully slow, with frequent stops to avoid German patrols. By midnight, they had covered less than 2 miles, and the driver's condition was deteriorating as shock set in. "We need to find shelter and medical supplies," Doc advised quietly. "He won't survive the night in this cold." Jack nodded grimly, studying their position on his increasingly soggy map. "There's a Belgian farmhouse about half a mile ahead, might be our best chance." The decision carried significant risk. The farmhouse might be occupied by German forces or local collaborators, but the alternative was watching their driver die slowly from his wounds and exposure. They approached the darkened farmhouse cautiously, observing from concealment for any sign of occupation. When no movement was detected, Jack and Doc conducted a careful reconnaissance before determining it was empty, the owners having fled the advancing battle. Inside, they found basic supplies and, crucially, a wood stove that provided warmth. Doc immediately set to treating the wounded driver using medical supplies from his kit, while the radio operator attempted to establish contact with American forces using a backup hand-cranked radio. "No response on any frequency," he reported after repeated attempts. "Either we're out of range or they've changed frequencies." Jack considered their options. They were behind enemy lines with a wounded man, minimal supplies, and no immediate prospect of rescue or extraction. The tactical situation suggested German forces were all around them, continuing their advance toward the Meuse River. "We rest here tonight," he decided. "At dawn, we assess the situation and determine our next move." Throughout the night, they took turns standing watch while the others rested. Jack used his time to study the maps, identifying potential routes back to American lines while avoiding likely German movement corridors. Dawn brought both clarity and complication. The weather had improved enough to allow visibility, but this same visibility made movement more dangerous. From their vantage point in an upper window of the farmhouse, They could see German vehicles moving along a road about a mile distant. "They're still advancing," Jack observed, "which means our lines have fallen back further than planned." The driver's condition had stabilized but remained serious. He could be moved if necessary, but any extended journey would be difficult and dangerous. Their decision was made for them when the radio operator finally established contact with an American unit. The news was both welcome and concerning. 101st Airborne is holding Bastogne against encirclement, he reported. "They say we're closer to their perimeter than to our original lines. Recommended we attempt to reach them using these coordinates as a guide." Jack studied the map, calculating distances and risks. Bastogne was approximately 8 miles from their current position, through territory known to contain significant German forces. But if the 101st was holding the town, it represented their best chance of reaching friendly lines. "We move at dusk," Jack decided, using terrain features for concealment. Priority is avoiding contact with enemy forces. The day passed tensely as they prepared for their journey. Doc fashioned a stretcher for the wounded driver using materials from the farmhouse. Jack and the others gathered what supplies they could carry, focusing on water, medical items, and ammunition for their sidearms. As darkness fell, they set out toward Bastogne, moving cautiously through forests and along stream beds to avoid roads and open areas where German forces might be encountered. The going was slow and difficult, particularly with the improvised stretcher, but they made steady progress through the night. Dawn found them sheltering in a dense thicket, having covered perhaps 3 miles toward their objective. They could hear the distant sounds of combat around Bastogne, suggesting the 101st was still holding, despite being completely surrounded. The second night of their journey brought new challenges as snow began falling heavily, reducing visibility, but providing additional concealment. The temperature dropped further, creating risk of frostbite and hypothermia. It was during this night that they encountered the first direct evidence of the brutality of the German offensive. In a small clearing, they found the bodies of American soldiers who had been captured and executed, their hands bound behind their backs. "Malmedy massacre," Doc said quietly, examining the scene. "Word was spreading about this before we got cut off. SS units executing prisoners." The discovery hardened their resolve to reach American lines, understanding that surrender was not a viable option in this battle. Their progress continued for 2 more days, each night bringing them closer to Bastogne, but also depleting their supplies and energy. The driver's condition deteriorated despite Doc's best efforts, infection setting in despite the cold. On the 4th night, they finally approached the American perimeter around Bastogne. They could see the flashes of artillery and hear the sustained small arms fire that indicated the 101st was still fighting fiercely. "We need to approach carefully," Jack cautioned. "Our own lines will be hair-trigger alert. One nervous sentry and we're dead." They waited until first light, hoping to be more easily identified as Americans. As dawn broke, they prepared to make their final approach. It was then that Jack noticed smoke rising from a small valley to their left, away from the direction of Bastogne. The smoke pattern was unusual, not from artillery or tank fire, but from multiple small sources. "That's not a military position," Jack observed. "Let's check it out before we make our final approach to Bastogne." They moved cautiously toward the smoke, staying within the tree line for concealment. What they found changed Jack forever. A small concentration camp lay nestled in the valley, hidden from aerial observation by the surrounding forest. The smoke came from crematorium chimneys. As they watched from concealment, they could see emaciated prisoners in striped uniforms being forced to load bodies onto carts. "My God," Doc whispered, his medical training making him acutely aware of the prisoners' condition. "They're starving to death." Jack had heard rumors of German concentration camps, but had dismissed many as propaganda exaggeration. Now the horrific reality was before him. This wasn't just war, it was systematic atrocity. "The Germans must be evacuating the camp," Jack observed, noting the frantic pace of the SS guards. "They don't want the Allies to find it." The 10th twist of fate unfolded as Jack made a decision that transcended military protocol. "We can't just leave them," he said quietly, "not to be murdered or marched to death." Doc looked at him in shock. "Jack, there are only 4 of us. 1 wounded. We have sidearms against machine guns." "We have surprise," Jack countered, "and we have knowledge of what's happening at Bastogne. The Germans are fully committed to the offensive. This camp is probably minimally guarded now." It was a tremendous risk, but Jack couldn't turn away. The engineering philosophy that had guided his entire career that machines existed to serve and protect people, extended now to this desperate human situation. We observe until dark, he decided, count guards, identify routines, then we act. Throughout the day, they conducted careful reconnaissance of the camp. As Jack had suspected, the guard force was minimal. Perhaps a dozen SS troops, focused mainly on accelerating the evacuation process rather than external security. That night, they implemented a daring plan. Using the radio operator's knowledge of German phrases, they created a diversion by calling out orders in the darkness, suggesting a German patrol was approaching. When several guards moved to investigate, Jack and Doc neutralized them silently, acquiring their weapons. Now better armed, they systematically isolated and eliminated the remaining guards in small groups. By midnight, they had secured the camp and freed approximately 50 prisoners, the only ones remaining after earlier evacuation transports. "We need to move fast," Jack told the stunned prisoners through a Polish prisoner who spoke English. "American lines are 6 miles south. We travel in small groups to avoid detection." Doc organized the healthiest prisoners to assist the weakest. Jack and the radio operator established a route using terrain features for maximum concealment. The journey was grueling. Many prisoners could barely walk. Every sound in the darkness seemed like a German patrol, but the shared determination to escape the horror of the camp drove them forward. By dawn, they had reached the outer defensive perimeter of Bastogne. American paratroopers were shocked at the procession emerging from the mist. 4 American soldiers leading a group of skeletal camp survivors. Jack reported immediately to the commanding officer, Brigadier General McAuliffe, providing both the intelligence from his journey and documentation seized from the camp. "This changes things," McAuliffe said grimly after reviewing the evidence. "This isn't just about military objectives anymore." Jack nodded in agreement. "No, sir. It's about what we're fighting against, what we're fighting for." The 11th twist was about to unfold.